Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. Isn't this a beautiful day in South Georgia? Welcome. Thank you, thank you. You know the Chamber of Commerce is responsible for the weather in Valdosta, so good job, Myrna. Good job, Myrna. We're so proud to have you with us today for the first of what we hope will become an annual activity in our community, the Innovation Summit. And we're especially happy to have the co-sponsors that we have with us this morning. Our wonderful partner at the Rainwater Conference Center and Tourism Authority, Tim Riddle, our Executive Director there, and Cheryl Oliver, the Executive Director of the Annette Howell Turner Center for the Arts. I'm going to ask them to come up and join me, if you would please, folks. Will you please give them a big, excited round of applause? With Cheryl, you can almost always expect a performance. So we felt we needed a little oomph this morning, so we brought in Cheryl. We needed Tim for, Tim is providing the space for us today. Yes. The Innovation Summit is, I think, a logical extension of some of the things that we've done at our chamber over the last 10 or 12 years. As Betty Morgan, our Vice President for Business Development, can tell you, we understand at the Chamber that, that in order to stay relevant in today's changing economy, today's global economy, it takes continuous self-reinvention. And whether you're a student trying to determine what would be the best major for you because you want to make certain that you're attaining the skills that you'll need in today's workforce, or whether you're a small business whose business model has to continually reinvent itself to make sure that you're meeting the needs and demands of your customers and your clients, or whether you're a nonprofit organization such as ours, where you're constantly needing to see what changes are going on in your target markets. It's just very, very important always to be thinking about what's next, what's next, what's next. And what better way to do that than with some great knowledgeable experts in the area of innovativeness and creativity, and we'll hear just a little bit more about them in a moment. But first, I'd like to ask my partners to tell you why they think it's important for their organization to be involved in this first ever Innovation Summit. Tim Riddle?
Thank you. If you can tell me how my mind works later, gold star for you. Innovation, change, people talk about thinking out of the box. I would tell you, in the hospitality business, I've been in this business for, well, longer than I care to say. But I've seen a lot of interesting things. I've tackled two people who are unclothed in different parts of buildings. But in this business, it's, you see it all. This is about the only type of business I've ever been in where you can literally have mud wrestling on a Saturday night and feet washing Baptists in the same room the next morning, and never the twain shall meet. But so you have to sometimes try to get out of the box and maybe approach some things a little differently. So I think the more you can open your mind to possibilities. As a matter of fact, we'll tell you we've changed. Myrna will tell you we should probably say we're a yes but building. We've changed to a yes and building to get the negativity out of it. But our motto here is we never say no. Unless it's illegal or unsafe, if you ask Rainwater for something, you will get a yes. You may get a yes and it will take 15 minutes, or yes and it will cost you $500,000. But you will get a yes, and then we'll let you say no. So so that's kind of it all goes along with the whole thought process of maybe nothing is too hard or impossible when it comes to taking care of a customer's needs. But we try to keep the open mind with our whole approach of the yes and philosophy. So I think it's important to constantly challenge yourself. And I'm a CPA from way back and very left-brained and plotting in my thinking. But so I need it as much as anybody, in terms of just thinking about ways to just be a little more open-minded and maybe change the way you do think about things occasionally. I think it keeps you fresh. I think that's why I still enjoy it after 20 plus years. And so I think it's important. Now I'm passing on to my good buddy Cheryl.
Thanks, Tim. Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
what a day to forget your lipstick. And then Myrna asked me to come up here and talk, y'all. I feel like I don't have any clothes on. But then I realized that but Tim doesn't have any lipstick on either. I'm over here, all right. I am delighted to be here this morning. I'm so happy that we can partner with our wonderful Chamber of Commerce and our wonderful Conference Center Tourism Authority. We are truly partners in the best sense of the word. And you know, as a nonprofit, I'm realizing more every day that we, in order to thrive and not just survive, we have to think outside the trapezoid. It's not just a box anymore. I mean, it's this really complex thing that we find ourselves in. And so we are so ready. We do not call the people who come to the Art Center or who support us customers, but they are. They're patrons to us. But we got to keep those people happy, and we got to attract new audiences. And so with me, I have Meredith Knuckles, who's our communications administrator at the Turner Center for the Arts. And for those of you who have not been there, you need to come. You owe it to yourself. You should come before June 8th when Spring into Art comes down. So that said, I want to thank the Chamber for making this opportunity available to all of us. And I'm looking forward to new, innovative thinking when I walk out that door. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We do have a marvelous partnership of collaboration in our community with the economic development team that we've put together, and those are two fine examples of that team. We are so delighted to be able to work again with David Peterson. David and I go way, way, way back. I think I remember having a meeting with David with Dr. Hugh Bailey in the tobacco warehouse in Hayhira, where we were talking about high-tech needs for his company at that time. So we've known each other for 25 years, yes, and he hasn't changed a bit. He might have calmed down a little bit, but not a lot. I want to tell you just a little bit more about him. Our Innovation Summit MC is no stranger to innovation, having started multiple entrepreneurial enterprises, including Gold Leaf Technologies in beautiful downtown Hayhira, Georgia. Recognized as a thought leader in creativity and innovation, David speaks, writes, facilitates, and coaches leaders on metacognition and enables individuals and companies to think about how they think. Here to kick off the Innovation Summit, please join me in welcoming international speaker, author, serial entrepreneur, and shipwreck survivor, David Peterson.
All right, we've got a great program in store for you today. And some of you, at some point during the day today, are going to have the thought, perhaps multiple times, oh, I don't see how we could do that. I don't see how I could do that. And as we go through the day, I want you to really think about this idea of these thoughts that pop into your head when somebody brings something to your mind that might be a little challenging or it might be a little bit out there, and you go, oh, I don't see how I could ever do that. Start thinking about how you can do things. What would it take for me to actually do that? How is it possible that me or my company could actually do that kind of thing? So think about that as we go through today. Now, it's still early in the morning, and I know it's a beautiful day outside, and you're thinking about all kind of other things you do. So to make sure that you are really sharp, just like on top, I've got a quick quiz for you here. I'm showing you 5 products on the board. We have Post-it notes, Roundup, Sweet and Low, Velcro, and my personal favorite, Men's Rogaine. So my question for you is this. What do these 5 products have in common? Anybody? What do they have in common? Post-it notes, Velcro, Men's Rogaine, Roundup. Anybody? Household names. That is an outstanding answer, but not the one I was looking for. Anyone else? So, say again? Discovered by mistake. Or maybe you would say accident. That is to say that as they were working on something, then this product actually cropped up. Do you know when they came up with Roundup, what were they trying to do? They were trying to come up with a way to make plants grow faster. And you know what the amazing thing is it actually works. It makes the plants grow so fast that they cannot sustain life and they die, right? So all of a sudden now they're sitting there with this stuff saying we can't make it work, and somebody had a, hey, we can use this as weed prevention. What about men's Rogaine? Does anybody know what they were actually working on when they came up with that? Believe it or not, they were trying to lower blood pressure in men. And they had a topical solution that they were using to try and get this blood pressure. And as they're going through the testing phase, not a single subject's blood pressure got lower. But they started growing hair. So what I'm saying to you is that as you go about your daily work life, as your company looks at the types of things that it's doing, if you're in an innovative mode, if you're in an open mind and innovative mode, these kinds of events may occur for you or for your business, but you have to be open to them. What if the folks who were working on Roundup simply said, we can't make this work, and just threw that aside and said that's not going to work? How many billions of dollars of sales have there been of Roundup? So we have to be constantly thinking about this relative to the idea that there are opportunities for us to think innovatively. And so it's for this reason that I talk to companies and I ask, is innovation in your business impossible? You might think that you're the type of business, well, innovation is just not going to happen here. That's not what we do. Is it improbable? Maybe it could happen, but probably not. Or is it inevitable? The fact that change is going to occur whether or not you are actively a part of it. And it's for this reason that I talk about a term called exomorphosis, which literally means change from without. And in many cases, as I work with organizations around the country, I find that there are many industries that really kind of feel like, hey, this is what we do. This is how we do it. We don't really see the need to make any kind of change, and yet change is occurring all around them, and it literally is going to force them to make these changes, or they will perish. They will eventually go out of business. And so this is something that I really want you to think about as we go through the day and you hear these amazing speakers talking about different elements of innovation. This idea that even if I don't personally feel that innovation is a part of me or what I might do as my company and the leadership role that I have there, it is still going to occur. Am I going to be a part of it? Am I going to be a change agent? Now, I was challenged by an online contest to come up with a definition of innovation, 6 words or less. Ooh, I thought, how can I do that? And so I actually worked on it, and I came up with this. Innovation is creativity expressed, manufactured, and consumed. Think about this. If you're going to have innovation, it's going to start with creativity. You're going to be doing some creative thinking, but you have to be able to express it. How many times have you seen somebody or heard somebody say, oh, I had a good idea. Really? What is it? They forgot. And they didn't write it down. So it's like if we can't say it, if we can't write it down, then what real utility would a particular idea have? And yet, how many times have you heard somebody express and talk about an idea that can't be built, or a process, a procedure that's impractical? So we have to manufacture it. We have to be able to not only have the idea, but then actually create that thing so it can be put into production. And then, of course, just because something's made doesn't mean that it would be consumed by anybody. So if it doesn't have practical application to people, it's of no value. So we have to think of an idea, capture it, write it down, be able to talk about it, build it, even if it's a process procedure, and then it has to be useful for people to actually use it. And if you pass these ideas and things that you come up with through this filter, you'll see where innovation will generate directly through there. Now, I want to just talk a little bit real quick about creativity and innovation, because sometimes we think of these as interchangeable. Creativity, innovation. In fact, if you had a vexing problem in your company, the CEO or you might come out and say, okay, folks, we need to get creative, right? Isn't that what you'd say? Come on, folks, we got to get creative. But if you think about it, what we really should say is let's get innovative, right? Because creativity is just ideas. Innovation means something that we can actually put into practice. So I thought about this. How can I describe the difference between creativity and innovation? Do you guys remember, it's probably been 4 or 5 years ago now, but there was this crazy Austrian guy named Felix Baumgartner. And he thought it would be just a dandy idea to drink about 100 Red Bulls, go up in a capsule right on the edge of space and jump out. Did you hear about this? The guy's nuts. It was sponsored by Red Bull. And so, you know, he goes up there in the capsule, and if you haven't seen it, the video of him falling to earth, about 9 minutes and 20 seconds, is just amazing because it looks like he's about to become just a little tiny dent in the Kansas landscape. And so when I think about this, if you were going to go to the edge of space and jump, that's pretty creative. But what's innovative is to jump from the edge of space and live. Because I would argue that all of us in this room could do the first part. It's not that hard to, you know, now they would have had to have like strapped me in and then the door opens and then like a big boot, David, you're now jumping from space. So that's how I would do it. But he voluntarily went and jumped. But to see him spiraling around and then the technology that they put together for him to be able to like, you know, hey, can I have a Red Bull? I'm really stressed. So those are the kinds of things that we can think about in terms of how practical are our ideas. This may be a little difficult for you to see, but there are actually 9 identical types of innovation. I'm not going to take the time to go through them, but you may be only focused on one type of innovation, this sort of breakthrough innovation, something that's amazingly different. But there's all kinds of incremental and process innovation, even something as small as removing a step or a couple of steps out of a process that's been time-honored for your organization that saves a minute or 5 minutes magnified by the number of people you have over an entire year or years of process adds up to real money for your organization. But you have to specifically go after and say, I'm going to try and capture that innovation. I'm going to specifically look for those places where I can innovate. So don't think that there's only one type of innovation that's there. Any one of these could be the thing that spurs your business on to greater sales, to getting more customers, to advancing into new markets, right? So we have to be thinking innovatively. Now, innovation can be a breakthrough. It might be hard to kind of see that, but what you see there is on that left-hand side, there's a transmitter that is transmitting electricity through the barrier, lighting up the light bulb that's on the right side. So these folks at MIT have now perfected moving electricity through the air so that you don't need a wire. Now, what will that mean? What would happen in the future if this rainwater conference center had power all in the walls, just everywhere there's power? So now all of a sudden, if you needed something that needed power, would you need to go find a plug wherever it is to plug it in? Now you can have stuff. I mean, that's going to be amazing from the standpoint of what that will do from an architecture standpoint. 10 years from now is when you'll start seeing that. But it's breakthrough, big time breakthrough. But it can also be incremental. When you look at a product like the Apple iPhone, it didn't actually invent any of the components that's on it. All of the things like a camera and a calendar and the phone and, you know, all of these different things were all available from other vendors, but they put it together in a very unique and powerful way with a simplistic user interface and changed the whole industry of how people think about these personal data devices, right? Now, I love this. I'm a sailing guy. You heard that I'm a shipwreck survivor, whatever. But think about in the 1800s. If you wanted to move a bunch of product from, say, Australia to the United States, how did you do that? You needed a ship, right? You needed a ship with sails, and, you know, it took months and months and months. People and goods move through ships. Now we have these big container ships. And, of course, container ships are moving goods all over the place. But did you know that all of the container ships that are out there in the ocean right now make more pollution every year than every single car on the planet combined? So that's a real problem of how much, because they use the dirtiest of the nastiest oil and fuel and stuff for these big ships. So they said, if we can even save a little bit of fuel on here, and so you know what they did? They reached back in the past and said, hey, we could put a sail on that thing. And so now you have these huge cargo ships with a sail out in front of it, depending on the wind, and because it's pulling that thing along, it uses less fuel, thereby creating less pollution for our planet. So it's very important that we think sometimes big. Oh, we got to have the big breakthrough like the MIT electricity thing. No, it can be just incremental. So as you're sitting there today thinking about these different things that the speakers are going to share with you, I want to give you 6 reasons why that you should be innovating, right? Here we go. Number 1, Innovation will give you new potential energy. Now, this one's a little hard to describe, but there's a certain vibe, there's a certain energy that sort of flows through your company. And when people come to work, when even your own mindset as a business owner, when you come in, you're sort of like, hey, we know what we're doing. We're kind of on autopilot. We're doing the same things, whatever. When you start innovating, it brings in a new energy to the whole organization. New ideas, new products, new markets, new customers, all of that adds to this overall energy. People actually see activity occurring in your business, and that activity even generates more activity. So it allows you to differentiate from your competitors, and more importantly, as you'll find out a little bit later this morning, your staff will get very energized by the fact that you are innovating as a company. As you look at today's workers, they want to be involved in an organization that is innovative. Number two, it will make your company more efficient. So if you start looking at things such as processes, especially those processes that are multi-step, many of your businesses operate in a multi-step environment. And new people will come into your company and they'll say, here's the, manager will say, here's the 7 steps of how we do this process. And they'll raise their hand and go, why do we do step number 4? What's step number 4 for? There's 2 different ways you can handle that. The supervisor can say, Jones, step number 4 comes after step number 3, and it's before step 5. Shut up and do your work. That's one way to handle that. The other way is to go, you know what, it's very interesting that you asked that question. I'm not actually really sure. We're going to do some investigation and figure out step 4. And it may be that step 4 is no longer necessary. And if so, you can eliminate it from your process. It may be, if you're a banker like Tim Jones, it's like step 4 is required by the federal government. It's a regulation. We have to do that. Okay, well, then that's an explanation that as an employee I can now understand. We have to be very cognizant about how we're not being aware of new people coming to our organization who recognize changes that we could make. Innovation can help you create a unique brand, right? So many of you are in businesses in which you have many competitors and to which your customers and prospects might think of you as a commodity. How much different is one dry cleaning store from another dry cleaning store? How much different is one bank from another bank? How much different is one restaurant from another restaurant? So this idea of innovation creating a unique brand, and more importantly, your customers identifying your business as being one that's involved in innovation is very important. Fourth, innovation will help you attract more customers. I'm fascinated by this picture. If you start thinking about this idea of how do you actually even advertise and market your products and services, this is obviously some type of shuttle or a bus, or maybe a subway, like if you think about going into the Atlanta airport, on the subway, you hold those little things, and they put the watch on there so that while your hand is in there holding it, it looks like you have that watch on your arm. Wow, are you kidding me? That's amazing. How is it that we could start thinking about things like that really change the way people think about our brand, regardless of how commoditized you think your organization or the type of industry that you're in might be? You can come up with innovative ways to actually make that brand awareness become much greater. Innovation will help you attract better employees, and we're going to talk about that later this morning, how desperately important it is for you to be able to look out, find, attract, and retain the best employees that are now coming out of schools and that are going to be your future leaders as we go forward. They're looking for companies to show that they're ready to step up and be innovative. That's who they want to be associated with, and they vote with their feet if they think that you're not. And finally, it will enable transformational growth. This entire summit is really based on this idea that there is growth that's just organic because we're growing and we're getting some new customers in, but there's also transformational growth, this idea that we can really fundamentally transform what we're doing to attract new markets, go after new types of customers, and continue to be innovative. As we live in a global economy, we don't care that we're here in South Georgia. We have no geographic bounds as to who our customers might be and who our markets might be. And so it requires us to really think much more strategically and innovatively, and we have to be willing to break with tradition. We have to be willing to say, even though this is the time-honored way that this business has been done, we're going to think about it differently, and we're not going to be bound by any traditional boundaries that says this is what you have to do if you're operating this type of business. Can we do that? Can we start to think about the fact of how we could position ourselves for not this year's customer, not even next year's customer, but think down 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, and the massive amount of younger customers who are replacing baby boomers, not only in the workforce, but as the primary customers who are driving those services. Will they be interested in interacting with your businesses in the same way that their parents and their grandparents did? Really not. So that's why we have to transform. I just want to quickly say that a lot of times when I'm talking about this, people want to know, well, David, what's the impact of this? Here's a great illustration. Now, these are two technology companies. There on the left, you recognize that symbol. That company is Microsoft, and this company is Apple. Back in 2004, you may remember that Microsoft was a significantly bigger company than Microsoft. In fact, the head of Microsoft at the time, Steve Ballmer, openly ridiculed Apple as being just like their toys. There's it's a bunch of artists, with computers, whatever else. But look at it from a revenue standpoint. In 2004, Microsoft had revenue of $36 billion, Apple $8.8 billion, right? So you're talking about 5 times the size of Apple. What happened in 2004 to Apple? What'd they do? They came out with the iPod, and then the iPhone, and then the iPad, and then the new MacBook, and then the watch, right? And so this continuous innovation where they said, we are going to change the way people interact with the world digitally, and came up with this idea, as I mentioned before, nothing breakthrough, but just packaging and putting it together in a way that fundamentally changed the way people think about their daily lives. Now, last year, Microsoft had revenue of $93 billion. Hey, that's not bad. That's not bad. But look at Apple's revenue, $234 billion. So you're talking about, a 9.1 annual growth rate, but Apple's almost 35%. Now, I'm not trying to compare your business to Apple. What I'm saying is that if you take two common businesses, whether they're banks or dry cleaners or restaurants or whatever they may be, and one of them really starts to really kind of strategically innovates, not spin out of control and just do everything on a whim, but strategically innovates, you could see this similar type of thing of how do you pull ahead of your competitors is by having a constant thought of innovation and as you incorporate that into your strategic thinking. Robert Buckminster Fuller had this quote, and I think, oh my gosh, this was from back in the 50s. But he said, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, you build a new model that makes the existing one obsolete. So some of you there are sitting going, hey, there's just things that occur in our business that are going to limit me from how far I can go. And you're going to have to decide that you can bust through those walls, that you can literally change the dynamics and the conventional thinking of what it means to be in the business that you're in. And then come up with a new model, and then take that new model and perfect it and bring it to market, excite your employees, thrill and delight your customers and your prospects, and all of a sudden you start to see transformational growth. Transformational growth. So here's what we're going to do. I've put together a lineup of speakers. We've got 6 different speakers that are going to give little mini presentations. The first half of the program, we're going to be talking about technology and strategic thinking and things like payments and social media that are so critically involved. But then the second half, we're going to take a break. And then the second half, we're going to have some people issues, some things about how we communicate with our customers as the C-suite. And how do we actually attract and retain the best customers that we have. And then we've got a final presentation that's going to help us figure out how we're going to get crazy. We've got to get crazy. If we're going to get innovative, we're going to have to get crazy. So that's how we're going to end our day. Most of these speakers are from the local area who are just amazing, but we've got 2 folks that we actually brought in from out of town. So I think you're going to really, really be excited about this lineup of speakers that we have. So I'm again challenging you to have an open mind. Have an open mind. If you think back to when you were a child, that's when we had open minds. That's when we could play without any embarrassment. That's when we could creatively think. You could take a couple little sticks and whatever, and all of a sudden, you've got a whole Wild Western show going on, right? That time, we knew how to be creative and think with an open mind. And over the years, as we get older, we then all of a sudden decide that we no longer can have that kind of open mind. I'm asking you to sort of reach back into your childhood and have an open mind about these thoughts and concepts for you. So with that backdrop, let me introduce to you this morning's first innovator. Lee Wetherington is Director of Strategic Insight for Jack Henry & Associates. Lee develops actionable insight and strategy for the financial services industry at large. To this end, he creates programs, presentations, and articles designed to orient and educate financial executives on the trends and implications of new technologies. An international speaker, Lee has delivered over 500 keynotes, focusing on the opportunities and challenges of innovation and transformational growth. Lee received bachelor's degrees in economics and English from Duke University in 1990, and in 1993 completed graduate studies at Emory University before joining a scrappy payment startup called Gold Leaf, born right out of the back room of a community bank in Hayhira, Georgia. Here to deliver Think Like a Freak, a guide to transformational thinking, please join me in welcoming Lee Wetherington.
Thanks. Thank you. Okay, we're on a clock. Let's go. So, I get paid to think. So, David's talking about transformational thinking, how transformational thinking is necessary for innovation. I want to connect the dots here for you. If I can actually get this to, there we go. I want to connect the dots here for you just a moment to give you the bigger picture. I am a meta-analyst. Does anybody here know it? David likes to use fancy words like metacognition, and then you really think, what is that? And then he tells you that's thinking about the way you think. Others might call that Buddhism. You can call it whatever you like, but thinking gives rise to all else. And so there's this intermediary step between the thinking and the doing. The thinking, the creativity, and the innovation, the idea, the application, etc. And it's the seeing. How you think affects what you see, and more importantly, what you don't see. My job, and what Thinking Like a Freak entails, is doing an inventory of your own blind spots, controlling for them so that you can see things otherwise you will not see. And this is especially important in looking forward and doing the work of strategic foresight, which is what the $10 word we use for that in my industry. So I am the strategy guy for a big publicly traded company, and this is my job, to look forward, to control for my own biases and blind spots, and try to come at the best, most unbiased view of what's going to happen in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, okay? So I'm here to talk to you a little bit about how I do what I do, and to hopefully give you some takeaways for that. I want you all for a moment, hopefully we've bonded a little bit. Would you trust me just for a second and close your eyes? I'm about to ask you a question. I want you to go ahead and close your eyes, and I'm going to ask you a question, and then you're going to answer before you open your eyes. And the question is, do you consider yourself a better than average driver? If you do consider yourself a better than average driver, please, before you open your eyes, raise your hand. Raise your hand. Now keep those up, everybody. Open your eyes. All right, roughly 65 to 70% of the room considers themselves better than average in driving. That is statistically impossible, even for this room. And I'm introducing you, just an introduction of your own biases, right? What are you comparing yourself to? Well, I text and drive more safely than other people. That's probably what you're thinking, right? Nobody sees me when I'm texting, right? So we have these little stories that we tell ourselves. David Peterson can read a newspaper and drive, a literal newspaper and drive at the same time, but he would consider himself a better than average driver. He would say, well, look at my record. I haven't gotten to a lot of accidents, Lee. So we have these little stories that we tell ourselves. We believe those stories. They help us get through the day, but they introduce tremendous blind spots when it comes to assessing reality. I want to ask you another question. Does stress cause ulcers? Yes or no? Yes? Does stress cause ulcers? Okay. No? Okay. Stress does not cause ulcers. It has never caused ulcers. This has been settled science for years, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dr. Barry Marshall. He figured out and found the bacteria in the gut, specifically that if it's there, will begin eating away at the gut and cause what we call ulcers. It has nothing to do with stress. But we continue to believe that even to this day, even the people that are here. Why? Because of a narrative bias. Well, when I get stressed, my belly feels kind of hot. That means there's probably acid in there, and that acid's probably eating my guts out. That makes sense. I get stressed, ulcers happen. No, it doesn't. The narrative makes sense, the story seems compelling, and so you believe falsehoods indefinitely. And all of us do it. We all do that. You have to get real with your view, the way you see things. Let me ask you this, does eating fat make you fat? If you eat a lot of fat, do you get fat? Yes. Who says yes? Who says no? No's have it. Some of you raised your hands twice. I know that. Somebody's like, I'm going to play this game all day. All right. No. The answer is no. Eating fat does not make you fat, yet we have a multi-billion-dollar low-fat, no-fat, quasi-fat, 1%, 2% industry built on this lie that fat makes you fat. Not only that, these products, to make up for the fact that the fat's not in them, sugar is put in them, calories is put in them, and calories is what makes you fat. Good job, America. Okay, do you get my point? We have blind spots. We have stories we tell ourselves. And until you do the inventory of those blind spots honestly with yourself, and if you've got a few honest friends, get them in on it, right? You will not be able to see the things that allow you to do the strategic foresight, which puts you in the position to do real innovation. That's the bottom line. Now, please remember that. It's think, see, do. All right, but we have a corporate blind spot specific to innovation itself. Innovation requires foresight, but again, foresight's really difficult to do with built-in blind spots. So I have a friend of mine. His name is Ron Adner. He is a professor of strategic innovation at the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth. He wrote a book a few years ago, probably the best book. If I were to recommend one book on innovation, it would be The Wide Lens. And Ron points out one very interesting thing that he makes a definitive proof for in case study after case study after case study. And that is that the biggest problem now with trying to do innovation successfully is that innovation itself has changed. Innovation is not what it was 25 years ago or even 50 years ago. We used to have big giant companies like IBM and GM, et cetera, and they were entities and islands unto themselves. They created everything from beginning to end. They were their own supply chains, right? We don't have companies like that anymore. We innovate in ecosystems. You don't innovate anymore, you navigate ecosystems is what you do. And we are all connected to each other through application programming interfaces or APIs. If some of you have heard about that, some of you have not. But we don't have to create everything as one company. Other specific smaller companies can do these other things well, and we tie to them, we license from them, we partner with them, we API to them, and then we put something together like an iPhone or some other product that is compelling to the end user. Now, what I want you to take away from this is that it is now more complex, and it's getting more complex because we continue to fragment. We continue to specialize. All of those apps that you have on your phone, they do one little tiny thing really, really well, right? And then you got to open up a different app to do this other thing really, really well, right? So we have all of this fragmentation. We have all of this complexity. And there's a different skill set in innovating in complex ecosystems versus innovating as a completely sort of verticalized company, right? Like it used to work. Now, just to point this out, I want to show you, this is from 2011 to 2015. You won't be able to read all of the logos here, et cetera. This is basically the number of startups that reach $1 billion in valuation, right? These are called unicorns, if you're familiar with that term. Why did suddenly we get an explosion in unicorns in roughly 2013, 2015? Does anybody know that? Well, there are a few reasons for that. One is the Jobs Act. I won't get into the details of that. But the other reasons are because the cost of creating a startup company dropped from an average of $5 million in the year 2000 to $5,000 in the year 2013. Why? It's just a group of people in a garage with a good idea about a new app they're going to put into the iTunes ecosystem, right? It can be as simple as that. And this is why we have all of these companies and all of these startups. In my industry, we call them fintechs, right? The ones that are particular to our own industry. And there's 4,000 of them between the US and the UK. And banks and credit unions are trying to figure out how do we take advantage of that. They're trying to really figure out now, how do we partner with all of these fintechs? Not be scared that they're going to disintermediate or disrupt or take our franchise away from us. This is the question now. So, how is innovation usually done, even for the smallest of the small business? By the way, David mentioned 9 different types of innovation, but basically it comes down to 2. There's big I innovation and there's little I innovation. And most of us here in this room, we do little I innovation. We're not Google, we're not Apple, we're not PayPal. Well, some of us are trying a little bit to be PayPal. But there's big I and there's little I innovation. They're both valid. It's really good to understand and be on the same page, even especially among your own teams, which kind of innovation you're talking about. One person can say innovation, another person says innovation. They're talking about 2 totally separate things. But typically what we mean is we identify the customer's needs, we take those needs, create a great product, and hopefully get that product out to market before our competitors. That's innovation, right? No. That's execution. That's product execution, ladies and gentlemen. It's not. You can do all 3 of these things, but in a complex ecosystem, you can fail, and fail miserably, fail spectacularly. Would you like to get a few examples? Okay. This is the first ebook, the Sony ebook. How many of you here had a Sony ebook? Of course you didn't have a Sony ebook. And I'm about to tell you why you don't have a Sony ebook. Sony plowed millions of R&D dollars into the development of this ebook, which, by the way, still had the same feature functionality as the Amazon Kindle does today, granted in a clunkier format, if you can see that. Yes, of course. But that was not why it failed. They built this. I mean, this was an amazing engineering feat. They give it to the world for people to buy, and what happened? What was not out there? What didn't exist? Well, I got my new Sony ebook reader. What do I need now? Books! There was no ebook system. There was no digitized version of books out there for you to put onto your Sony ebook. So it died a quick and miserable death. And then Amazon figured out, oh, we've got to build that part of the ecosystem before we build an ebook. Everybody got it? What about these? Anybody got any Michelin run-flat tires on your vehicle? They're still here. A few specialty applications in the military, etc. These were created in the early 1990s. Michelin decided, why are we still our entire world is riding around on air-inflated pieces of rubber, and they get punctured and boom, and people die, and they're on the sides. Why are we doing that? Make a better tire. It gets punctured, it doesn't go flat. They engineered it. They perfected it, right? All the other tire companies, Michelin, please don't destroy us. Please license us the new way of making tires so that we can all hold hands and walk into the future together. And Michelin said, so let it be written, so let it be done. And it was done, and they put the first set on the Honda Odyssey minivan because families like safety, and this was a real big, easy sell. But you know what they missed, right? They even train the garages. If you take a run-flat tire into a garage and say, can you fix that? You got to have a completely different set of equipment to fix a run-flat tire than a regular tire. So they went around to all these garages and they put in the expensive equipment. And these garages sat there for years, a couple of years before they saw the first one of these come in. And by that time, they said, man, this stuff's taking a lot of room up in the garage here and it's not producing any revenue. Get rid of that crap. Right? So by the time the first Honda Odyssey minivan comes in, honk, honk, hey, can you fix it? No, but we can take them tires off and put some 4 good regular tires on there for you. Millions of dollars lost. This is the first 3G full-color internet-connected phone, 2002, the Nokia. Anybody remember Nokia? The Nokia 650, don't raise your hand, that convicts you. This Nokia 6650. First internet-enabled full-color phone. What was the problem? The miniaturization engineering here was unlike anything that had ever been accomplished in the history of our species. What was missing? Anybody want to guess? There were no 3G networks. I got this phone. Can't connect it to anything, but look at it, right? Does not work. The ecosystem was not factored in. So what Ron tells us, what Professor Adner commends to our attention, is that now all of us are in complex ecosystems, and you can't just focus on the execution. That's a blind spot. You have to factor in the co-innovation risk. What other things have to be in place for my innovation to matter, to be able to make it to the consumption stage that Dave mentioned earlier? What has to be, in order for it to be adopted and maintained? The garages have to be given a financial incentive to keep that equipment in there until we reach some kind of level of statistical significance with their business, with their own revenue. Okay, so here's the thing that I want you to take away if you take away nothing else from my quick presentation here this morning. And that is that I want you to understand the numbers, the probability of success, how to calculate it in a complex environment where your business has to rely on partnerships with one or more other businesses now. Okay, so here's an example. You're the business, you've got 4 partners. Now the percentages that you see there, that is your confidence. That's the percentage of your confidence that each of those partners will do their part in this joint thing that you do together, that they will deliver their part on time and on budget, 85%. So if I show this to you, well, that's pretty good, Lee. You got 4 partners, you're 85% confident that they will deliver their parts. What is the collective probability that this thing that you're going to pull off together will be done on time and on budget? That's very close, because it's the product of the percentages, right? It is not the average of the percentages. Got about a 52% chance. Do you understand what I'm saying? The more partners you have, the lower this number of and it's not that this means that you shouldn't pursue it. It means you should be realistic about understanding how soon it's actually probably going to hit the ground, and factor that into your own strategic planning. Has everybody got that? This is probably the most useful thing I can provide you this morning. Let's take a look. Okay, let's change that up. We've got 3 fairly solid partners that we have history with, and we've got, you know what, the thing that's really going to make this corporate, this collective innovation, this product that we're working on really differentiate it from everybody else, is we've got this one little feature function that's been innovated by this guy, literally one guy that's in a garage in Palo Alto, California. He doesn't really talk by phone because he's a millennial. We have to text back and forth with him, but we're going to bring him in to really seal this deal, right? So we've got about a 2% confidence level that he will develop and deliver his stuff on time and on budget. What does that do for the collective, the whole project? It means you've got now a 1.2% chance of delivering on time and on budget. Does everybody understand? This is probability. Now, there's a cognitive bias, and it's on a slide here that we'll get to in just a minute. The number one cognitive bias that I see crippling boardrooms of banks and credit unions across the country is called neglect of probability. We don't run the numbers. We just go, yeah, I'm a better than average driver. Based on what? Based on nothing but my hand, right? We're not data driven. We're not actually going out, what is an average driver? I don't know. Am I more or less safe? I don't know, right? This is how you calculate probability of doing innovation in complex ecosystems and being realistic about it, right? Of countering your built-in cognitive neglect of probability. Okay. So, Mr. Adner, back to him. You can't just try to execute, right? What do customers want? Build what they want, deliver it before anybody else does. That's execution, right? You've got to factor in for the co-innovation risk. What else has to be out there for my innovation to matter, take hold? Adoption chain risk. What has to be out there for it to be maintained, right? Okay, wonderful. So that brings us to the second book I'm going to commend to you, and this is the titular parent of today's presentation is Think Like a Freak. Steve Levitt, probably for my money, the most amazing economist that we've produced in the last 30 years. He's a behavioral economist, but he's really a data guy at the end of the day, data-driven. He, with Steve Dubner, his ghostwriter from the New York Times, produced this. Some of you have know about the series, the Freakonomics series you've probably heard about. Applying data to problems we have never been able to solve, and suddenly we have answers, and it pisses everybody off. Left, right, and center. We don't like it when we find out what the real answers are to things that we've been telling ourselves stories about, right? I'm sorry if I shouldn't have used that language, David. I apologize on behalf of the chamber. That is not language that is condoned. So it's called Think Like a Freak, but this is really about transformational thinking. It's about controlling for biases and blind spots by approaching problems, innovation, and strategy on the basis of data and less on the basis of hunch or ideology, okay? Which brings us back to the personal blind spots that we all have. What are they? Let me tell you, if you're really, really smart, you got a huge blind spot. Huge. If you're really political, you got a huge blind spot. If you're really religious, you got a huge blind spot. Now, do not leave this meeting saying, Lee Wetherington wants me to be an apolitical atheist. I couldn't believe. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying know where your own blind spots are, okay? You're very moral. What's the problem with moral people? Judgment. They judge everybody, right? It's problematic, right? I'm not going to work with Kevin. I saw what he drank on the weekends, you know, blah, blah, blah. Kevin doesn't have a drinking problem, just so you know that. You're human. You're human, ladies and gentlemen. We all have these blind spots. Just be honest about what they are and try to find out how they're blinding you, okay? So what about the cognitive blind spots? What about those blind spots? Well, we've got cognitive, we've got political, moral, historical, intellectual, etc. Let me run through these. Intellectual bias. I have some really smart people in my family. Really smart people in my family. And you know what the smartest of the smart people in my family, what they have a really hard time doing? Admitting when they're wrong. It takes them a long time to realize and to accept and come to peace with the fact that they're wrong. Why? Because they're so accustomed to being right most of the time, because they're so smart, right? It's a bias. Smart people have really entrenched bias. No, I've got to be right. I'm usually always right. How can I be wrong? You know, give me somebody that is quick to be wrong. You know, hey, David, you think X, but guess what? Here's the science on Y. Lee, you're right. I was wrong. Move on. Now we're cooking. Now that's how good strategy is done at a board level, at a C level, or whatever. Correction, course correction, go, right? Intellectual bias. Did you know, by the way, a lot of us in the financial industry, we go, we're going to put our money with guys who are going to be able to investment professionals, and they'll beat the market. They'll beat the S&P. Ladies and gentlemen, do you know the stats behind behind investment professionals and how often they beat the S&P? You could take all of the stocks in the United States and put them on that wall and set a chimp on this table with a dart and let the chimp throw a dart, and you would have about as much success in beating the market as you would paying an investment professional instead of putting your money in a Vanguard index fund. I said it. I said it. Do we know it? We don't want to know it. We want to think that we're with the smartest person. Okay. We have historical bias. Well, if this got us to here, this is where we're going. You know what that makes you blind to? Tipping points. Tipping points where the direction just completely changes. The iPhone comes out in 2007. Boom, boom, boom. Microsoft's not relevant anymore as much. Right? Okay. What about political bias? I am not here to start a fight with you, any of you. I'm here to tell you that the more politically extreme you are, the bigger the blind spots you suffer from. Left, right, or otherwise. Everybody got it? Okay, hopefully this angered everybody equally. Okay. Did you know there's something called a pro-innovation bias? Right? Do you know what that is? There's bias in innovation. Well, surely this is the way all currency of the future will be Bitcoin. Have you heard this? in the last few years? Bitcoin will take away fiat currencies controlled by the state who manipulate the value of what we own by raising and lowering the inflation rate, blah, blah, blah. We need Bitcoin that can technologically get rid of that and allow us to transact with each other. Okay, wonderful, except it's not true. But you know what is good? In other words, the pro-innovation bias is Bitcoin will be the way we transact no matter what. The whole world will eventually come to see and accept it as is. No, not as is. Not even close. The protocol underneath Bitcoin called blockchain is going to revolutionize a lot of things, but Bitcoin, not so much. It's a pro-innovation bias. Okay, so we have a lot of biases, and we could spend the next 3 days unpacking all of the cognitive biases, right? I would tell you to really pay attention to that probability neglect. Really pay attention. The believability bias is the ulcer virus. Well, no, it seems to make sense. I worry, my stomach gets hot, whatever. There's a story that seems to make sense even if it's factually, scientifically untrue. Okay, all right. So what else makes foresight difficult? Shifting trends, right? The fact that physical transactions in our space are going away. Thank you, David, right? They're disappearing. Now you mobile order ahead and pay for Starbucks, for Taco Bell, right? You buy online and pick up in store at Target, at Walmart. Those are the biggest trends in retail right now. What? Physical payments are sublimating. They're disappearing. Kevin Moland's going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. What does that ultimately mean, David might ask, right? It means ultimately you walk in the store, you grab the thing you want, and you walk out of the store. And you say, well, Lee, you freak, how soon is that coming? It's already here. It's already in Seattle last year. Amazon's building stores. Walk in, you walk out. And an Amazon one-click transaction is automatically consummated as you walk out, based on geolocation, sensor fusion, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. It's already here. How's that going to impact your business? Oh, you mean we don't need a cash register anymore? Is that what you mean, you skinny little hick monkey? Yes, that's what I'm saying. Ultimately, you won't have a cash register. That's what I'm saying. Tipping points, right? When things change. What's going to happen with voice commerce now that you can actually at home go, Alexa, I need more hair gel? It will be there tomorrow. This is Harry Potter stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Conjuring things out of the air. How does that affect your business? Have you thought about voice commerce? How would people use their voices to interact with you and buy stuff from you and never see a screen? How would that work? How would that feel? What's involved? How do you write a skill set for Amazon or Alexa to do that for you? You got to let data drive. I'm going to end on this. Ladies and gentlemen, if you know soccer, do you know soccer? Do you know the penalty kick? This is the most dramatic. I'm not a big soccer fan. The most dramatic, I can't wait for penalty kicks if I ever have to watch soccer, because that's where all the drama is. So you've got the goalkeeper there, and I want to show you, I'm going to show you statistically where goalkeepers go. Okay. Statistically, where goalkeepers go, this is across all world soccer matches. 57% go to the goalkeeper's right, 42% lunge to the left. Only 2% of goalkeepers just stay there. Now, if you're a kicker, where do you think you should kick based on the statistics? Right up the middle. Score! Right up the middle. What percentage of penalty kickers actually kick up the middle? Only, I'll show you, only 17%. The goalkeeper's only going to be there 2% of the time. You've got a 7% greater chance of scoring the goal if you kick directly to the center, because usually they're going to flinch to the left or flinch to the right, right? That's what the statistics say. Why don't more penalty kickers kick up the middle? They all know this statistic, I would tell you. The professional teams, they all know this. Why don't they do it?
That's where the goalkeeper starts.
That's where the goalkeeper starts, but it's more fundamental than that. It's psychological. The psychological thing, if that goalkeeper doesn't move and I kick this ball directly into him and he catches it, the thought, the improbability, just the thought of that happening is so shameful, right? I will be the scourge of my country when I go back to Colombia. They will beat me with sticks in the streets because I kicked the ball and he didn't move and And oh my gosh, my whole world fell apart. Everybody got it? You got to let data drive. You got to let data drive. So I would commend you this, and then I'm stepping off. Conventional wisdom is often wrong because of the biases we've unpacked. Correlation often does not mean causation. Do not make the danger of that assumption, much less extrapolate out into the future based on that. Learn to say, I don't know. Don't pretend to know things that you don't. Get comfortable saying, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. David Peterson taught me that. Tell them you don't know, tell them you'll find out the answer and get back to them later. Being right is rarely enough to persuade, especially if you're smart. Think like a child. Think like a child. The biggest blind spot we all suffer is not admitting that we have a blind spot to begin with. That's it. That's all. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Okay. Lee Wetherington, listen, I've known Lee since he was in high school, and as the CEO of Gold Leaf Technologies, I got a chance to have a lot of these intellectual discussions with Lee. And I want to tell you that it's very true what he was talking about relative to this idea about smart people and needing to basically say you're right. The only good news is as CEO, I just made Lee say, David, you're right. So, just saying it's good to be the king. That's all I'm saying here. All right. Let's bring on our next innovator. Estel Powell has spent the last 14 years working in various product development roles, from quality assurance, product implementation, and product manager of SaaS environments in banking and in the healthcare industries. He's the founder of Estel, Powell & Associates, which works with businesses to enhance their social media and digital branding to increase their online presence, specializing in education with automation tools, content creation, reporting, and marketing strategies. Here to share with us how to harness social media for transformational growth, please join me in welcoming Estel Powell.
"84% of your potential clients and customers trust a complete stranger's online recommendation about your business just as much as your personal friends and family." It completely boggles my mind that somebody that they don't even know could literally influence if they're going to do business with you or I. And as we're thinking about this, how can you actually control that narrative? How can you actually influence those recommendations? You have to be in the know. You have to know what's going on. So how can you harness social media in order to actually have that transformational growth and influence? What I want to do is I want to talk about what the reality is. No longer really is it an option. It is now mandated for you to be actually successful in business to be on social media. If you're not doing it, you're planning to fail, unfortunately. So when we're doing this, there's a couple of reasons, a couple of things that you already probably know today, and there's a couple of things that maybe you didn't think about. And we're going to go through and kind of discuss some of those options. The first thing is we talked about brand awareness earlier. Now, it's not just you being on social media. Here I am and waving your hands. How many of you use Google and do searches on businesses today? Pretty much everybody in here is using Google. Google now allows you not only to find your business website, but also it traverses that chaotic spider web of social media, pulling back all the relevant material. So that gives you more definitive authority, and it also gives you more relevance and presence online. But then also, it allows you the opportunity to really change how that customer experience is. You remember back in the day, people would have to walk in and talk to you and buy your products, or they'd have to call you. Now you have complete and utter access for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you don't even have to be intrusive at all to those customers. It can happen anytime. And what happens is then you start to engage with those customers. And as you're engaging and getting to know more about what their needs are, why are they coming to me for this business? What are the answers, or what are the products that they are seeking from you? And as you're doing that engagement, you have to realize that you also need to look at the positives, but also those negatives. Sometimes people say some disparaging things, potentially, and you need to get ahead of that. Also, you've got reporting. And when you go into social media, you guys have probably seen some of the metrics. Not only are you learning about your individual customers, but you're also learning about maybe there's a different subset. Maybe there's an age, there's a gender, there's an interest, a following that maybe you didn't think about. And that's where you can start to become creative, as David was talking about earlier, and then you can turn that into marketing for yourself through social media. No longer do you have to blast out and cast this wide net using traditional marketing. You can now bait the hook for every single individual customer, that 100, that 1,000 that you want to go to. Design and develop those complete campaigns in order to reach those specific people. It's going to raise that conversion rate and lower what that cost is going to be. And that helps you as an individual business. And the reality is this, right? You're on social media, whether you believe it or not. You may go to the family reunion and you may see Grandma Sally over on the side and she's got her daughter sitting right there in her lap. Daughter's sitting there taking the selfies. Grandma doesn't even have a social media application or platform or Facebook, but her daughter does, or her granddaughter. So you're on social media whether you believe it or not. The idea of privacy and anonymity is pretty much gone out the door now with social media. It is so prevalent and there's so many people. It's about 2 billion people just on Facebook alone. That's literally a third of the entire world. Now here's the thing. It's complete chaos almost, but it's beautiful because you have all these different applications that are constantly popping up. Somebody wants to be that new innovative social media marketing platform. They want to be able to get that market share and help businesses and help users connect in a certain way. So the question is, how can you really navigate all that? What can you do to control or at least have some sort of influence or a guide on what you need to do while you're traversing through social media? Now, we talked about earlier that 84% of people actually trust online reviews as much as personal recommendations. When they go and they look and they see, they only are reading about 10 or less reviews online, 90% of the people. So what that inevitably means is that anything older really than 3 months is irrelevant. So it's no longer just you coming out and here I am on social media. It is now about that you have to engage on a constant basis with your potential customers and your current customers. And I'm going to get into a little bit more later as far as some features that have changed here recently that do impact you substantially as a business. And then 58% of people actually believe that the star rating matters the most. Think about it. When's the last time you went and bought a product on Amazon and you see those 5-star ratings? How's that process going as you're thinking about it? When you start and you look and you see you've got that 4.6 or 4.7 star rating, you look at that first page review. I'm looking for that guy that has the 1-star, the 2-star. What did you have negatively to say? Because I want to find out, is that going to be my issue? Or maybe it's a 3.5 star rating. Okay, I got to find something. But then I go through and I'm trying to find out maybe something's changed recently. So think about that because as you're dealing with your business, you have a presence out there and people are making those recommendations. They're making those assumptions about you and talking about you, even though you may not already be there. So recently, Facebook instituted recommendations toward the end of last year, and this is a specific feature that has changed, and I've seen it a lot more frequently, especially the last 3 to 4 months. And what it is, this is actually a true, and you probably can't read it, but I changed, of course, the names for anonymity purposes, even though it's social media. But basically, I had a friend that was talking about going down to Key West, and they solicited their friends, their audience, of where's a good place to stop in Key Largo in order to explore the nightlife. What this does is immediately when they hit that enter button, they get immediate results back from their audience, whether it be their friends, their families, or maybe even that stranger that's out there that's going to influence. And then, as they're inputting that information, Facebook is trying to connect. All right, where's that business at? I want to connect it over here. And then lastly, you also are going to get clear statistics. You're going to be able to see that 5-star rating or that 4.3. There was a recommendation for the hotel in the Hilton Key Largo. And you can get that information where it's at, and you can click and easily navigate over to where you need to go. And the way to think about this is that Facebook is not trying to get you business. Facebook is trying to get its users to where they want to go to get their goods, their services. So what can you do about that? Influencing the narrative. You have to be able to engage. You have to be able to influence what those people are talking about with you. It's not just the word of mouth. It's not just them walking in and out of the door of your business. It is now online. And there is nothing you can do to stop the floodgates, unfortunately. So to give you an example, there was a company, I'm going to call them the ABC company, back in 2014. They were about a 500 plus business. And I found out that not a customer, but a potential employee, and I know Cachet is going to get to a little bit with employees, but they went to do an interview, and literally wrote a disparaging and horrendous review on the business page. And the business petrified. They froze. And they sat there and let it stagnate. They didn't respond. They didn't communicate. What ended up happening? Somebody else came in with a negative review. And then somebody else came in. Next thing you know, this little snowball turned into an avalanche that just overwhelmed them. 3 years later, now they're having to dig themselves out of that hole. So the important thing to understand is that social media has to be a constant. You have to be thinking about how you can talk and communicate and be able to influence those individuals that are influencing others on your behalf, whether you know them or not. So the question is, what is in your toolkit? You're about to go venture into the jungles of the Brazilian rainforest, right? What is your tools? What's in the backpack? What are the things you can do? Because you got a limited amount of time. We all have a very limited amount of same amount of time in a day. So the first thing is, of course, your wits. What are you doing? You're the subject matter expert in your business. How are you developing and creating that content? How are you going and developing in relationships with those that are in that same sphere, that are innovators of that realm, and how are you working together? Now, once you've got that great content, what are you doing to really manage that content? Are you using HubSpot or Hootsuite or different various applications that are out there? Because there's just as many management content systems as there are probably social media platforms. So you can go through and you can publish and you can schedule and you can get these things ready to go and start managing it in a more cost-effective method. Instead of having to go to 10 different locations, you can do it all from one tool. And then next, monitoring. How are you keeping track of what people are talking about with your business? There's an application called Mentions. It'll literally email alert you to let you know that there is somebody talking about your business or keywords. And a few months ago, I actually flew to Washington, D.C., and as I was waiting to board the plane, they switched us, like at the last minute, literally swapped our concourse. And as I was standing there waiting to board the plane, I could see the stewardess behind the keyboard. And she was typing, and this guy comes up, and he starts grumbling, "When are we going to board the plane?" And then I could see her on the phone. At the same time, I've got them off the plane. You want me to put them back on? What do you want me to do? And she's confused, and I felt so empathetic. And I took a picture, and I posted it to my social media. And I was like, man, this girl deserves a raise. She is handling this negativity like a boss. Well, 9 minutes later, the airline actually responded and apologized for the inconvenience. And I thought, wow, they really actually responded so quickly like that to me? I wasn't even on the plane in my seat. I was still waiting to get on the plane. So being able to do that, there's no longer this brand loyalty. Now it's almost an engagement loyalty with people. Being able to engage makes me feel you care about me and what my options are. Because there are options. Like you saw earlier with Lee's presentation, there's hundreds of organizations coming out. I could go somewhere else. But are you willing to take the option of wanting me as a customer and engage with me? Automation, we talked about saving time. How do you innovate? Here's the thing. Let's say you create that wonderful content. Next thing you know, you've got 10 different social media platforms, because that's pretty easy to understand. You could have those, and you can literally take 30 seconds per individual trying to list out and publish that great content. Let's say you do it 10 times a day. Now your 5 minutes has become 50 minutes. What if we could use an application like IFT? IFT stands for if this, then that. Literally, you can shrink that entire time down to 5 minutes for the exact same work. So you can save your time and you can publish things in a creative way through rules and recipes in order to lessen the work on your burden of social media and then focus on the things that are actually more important to you and that you're the subject matter expert in as well. And then reporting. We talked about social media reporting, but what about your entire realm of presence? What about using Clout or Sci-Fi to find out exactly what are the things that people are saying about you, but how is that campaign working? How is your presence throughout the entire realm of social media? So what if you have a unique business, though? What if you have a very unique patron, like at the Art Center? You have very specific people that you're working with. How can you use knowing what you know about social media? How can you use the toolkits in order to really gain those individuals to come into your business? I want to talk about Massey Restoration. You guys may know these folks here in town. They have a very, very specific, unique business. They're dealing with catastrophic events such as fire, mold, weather damage. And it's never a pleasant experience, I'm sure, for those individuals. And so we collaborated back earlier, or end of last year. And we talked about how they could get more ingrained into social media, how they can get more in tune with who their customers are. And they created a three-prong approach because they could tell when weather was going to be coming through. And if you remember back in January, we had those storms that rolled through South Georgia. And a week before, they started preparing their customers, their potential customers, with how they could be prepared. Your flashlights, your water, your food. Here's how you can safeguard your house and protect your property, and what to do in the event of the inclement weather. And then we know that not only was their property lost and damaged, but there was unfortunately loss of life. So that second phase was to empathize and reach out and let them know that the community was in their thoughts and in their prayers in Adel and Albany that were hit the worst. And then after that, the third part was, let's help you rebuild. We're here for you. And they really did a great job with this full continuum of care for their specific niche and business. So as you're thinking about innovation, you're thinking about how you can think outside the box. You want to be able to understand your customers and do what you can to help them. So the question is, what is next for you? I think the biggest thing is learning exactly how you can harness social media. I know I crammed probably a week's worth of information into like 15 minutes. But the one thing I would stress most importantly is, when you go back into the office, take a hard look at what your true reality is on social media. What are people talking about and saying about you? And then maybe there's that one social media. Maybe you're not on Twitter, maybe you're not on Instagram. You could go and look and see, are people talking about my business, or what are people talking about my industry? And I think what you'll find is you'll be surprised to find that even though you are not there on social media, you are on social media. Thank you. Thanks.
Awesome. Give that to Ken.
Oh.
Awesome. Awesome. Estel, thank you very much. I got to tell you, this idea of consistency, if you're not actively involved in social media and you start to hear Estel and you think, I really have to do that, he said a very important word, and that's consistency, right? So if you start to do it and then you sporadically do it, that's a problem. So recently, Delta has started giving me a text message to tell me that my bag has been loaded onto the plane. So if you travel a lot, that's the one thing you do worry about if you have to check a bag. And so I get this text message that says, your bag is on the plane. It's like, great, glad to know it's going with me, whatever. And so I had a trip where I literally had to make 3 connections. So your bag's on the plane, and then I got your bag's on the plane, and then the third time, they don't send you an email, your bag is not on the plane. I just didn't get an email. And now all of a sudden, I have this 45-minute little commuter flight with angst over the whole time about my bag's not on the bag, and it came. But the point was, is if Delta is going to be really, really consistent, that third email was super important to make sure that I knew that they followed all the way through. Be consistent. Now, I'm really excited to bring up our next innovator. Over 20 years ago, I convinced him and his family to come join us here in Lowndes County, and all of us in the area have been blessed that he did. Kevin Moland is Director of Product Strategy for the Enterprise Payment Solutions Division of Jack Henry & Associates, where he brings to bear more than 3 decades of experience designing online and mobile financial solutions. Kevin is a featured speaker at conferences, seminars, and user group meetings, and he serves as an adjunct faculty member for numerous banking schools. His informal style and keen storytelling skills make him a sought-after speaker, teacher, and host. Here to present Transforming Payments in the Digital Age, please join me in welcoming to the stage Kevin Moland.
I like the height difference. I have a feeling of power. So like all men and women, I suspect, I compare myself to others. And so you've just heard 3 really good speakers. You're going to hear some more. And so I need to present very quickly for you 3 ways in which I feel that I'm better than anyone that you have heard yet. First off, I'd like to point out that I'm taller than anyone you've heard yet. Unless I do something to Kent in the back room before his turn to speak, that won't last. But right now it's an advantage. Second, I would say that these people you're listening to today talk to some of the brightest and best people in the world. my primary speaking is done to a middle school and high school Sunday school class every Sunday morning. You're way smarter than the people I usually talk to, so that's another advantage to me. And then third, when I finish my presentation, you will have something that you did not have at the end of any of the other presentations, and that is a refreshment break. So those three things I think are make me important things. I am, in my nature and in my core, a Sunday school teacher, and so I always, my goal every time I talk to people is to try to give them the one gift I can, which is to alter their perception in some small way. And so if you will have an open mind, I'm going to go a little Star Wars on you here, maybe more than some of the previous folks have, but I think it's important for us to be able to place ourselves in the context of our times in a way that gets around those biases. I do have an agenda, but we're not going to pay any attention to that. We'll just move right along. So that is a picture of my grandfather, Milo Daniel Moland. My grandfather had kind of an unusual life. He was married once when he was in his 20s. Wife died after just a couple of years, no children. He was married for the second time when he was 55, and his new wife was 21. They had 9 children. My father was the youngest of 9. When he was born, his father was 75 years old. My grandfather was born in 1858. Now, just a little perspective on that. A year later, in 1859, Charles Darwin wrote Origin of the Species, okay? It was a long time ago when my grandfather was born. But if you think about 3 admittedly long generations maybe, but if you think about how the world has changed from the birth of my grandfather until the day that I'm standing here on the stage in front of you, it boggles the mind, the difference. Truth and justice and honor still matter as much, yes, but the difference in the circumstantial details of our lives is so profound that I probably can't even express that to you. The way that this came home to me probably the most was in 2007, I saw an ad for this little gizmo on TV, and it looked really cool on TV. They were doing historically unprecedented things like pinching and spreading and you know, swiping, and it was an iPhone. And I thought to myself, that probably looks way better on TV than it would in somebody's hand. But then one of the reasons that life can be terrible for you is if you have Lee Wetherington in the next office, everything cool always gets adopted by him first. And so Lee, a couple of weeks after they came out, came into the office with his iPhone, and it was so much cooler in his hand than it even was on TV. So I walked around for a few weeks with the worst case of phone envy the world has ever seen. And then one day I was sitting at lunch, and my lovely wife, who is here today, just find the prettiest girl in the room. I'm so sorry to the rest of you ladies. She shows up at the office and says, you know, you're a little dull, but you don't want a lot, and you're a pretty decent husband, and here you go. And she handed me the bag with AT&T on the front. Now, this was a $600 device in those days. It was none of this pay $20 a month kind of thing. You bought the phone. And so she handed me that phone, and I still love her today for that one act. And it revolutionized my daily life in a way more than anything had since 1993 when I went to work for David and Ahira, and he said, we ordered your laptop. And I said, why would I ever need one of those? It really did change things. And that was less than 10 years ago. There were only 15 buttons on the phone. There was no such thing as an app store, and that was changed. Think about how much that device has changed our world in 10 years. We've got all kinds of tablets, wearables, all kinds of things. And just in 10 years, the world has changed a great deal. There are 7 billion people in the world, 4.8 billion mobile phones, 4.2 billion toothbrushes. Okay? Every minute, more than 3 times as many smartphones are activated as babies are born. And in 2015, we actually passed one threshold where we were on our phones more than we watched television. And last year, we actually hit the 5-hour per day mark, 300 minutes per day that we spend on our devices. Hard to imagine, but yet that is who we are. So here's the thing I want to tell you. We see the world this way. We see this beautiful sweeping hill that leads to the pinnacle of the mountain, which are these great mobile devices that we have. And that is an unbelievably false perception of where we live. Because in reality, there are next big things coming after this last big thing. And if you really talk to most experts, Where we really are is somewhere down here. And by the way, it doesn't mean that change is going to continue to happen like it has and will. Change is accelerating. So the world is actually getting more and more different. And in fact, we think of the devices we have today as revolutionary devices, and they are, and they were, but they are more importantly evolutionary devices, because technology is going to continue to bring us more and more different things. And we think of ourselves on the mountaintop of this great change, and really we're still in the foothills. No telling what's going to come. So what would the next big thing be? Well, at Christmas, my wife and I got in, if you do the math, in a 34-year marriage, 5 times a year, Valentine's, Mother's Day, birthday, Christmas, anniversary, you got to come up with 3 or 4 unique gifts she didn't know she needed, or she would have already bought them. And so you multiply 5 times 34, and you get the idea that gifts are tough for both of us. So last Christmas, we got in the usual bind, and we had a little 2-day before Christmas huddle. Do you have anything? No, I don't have anything for you. Do you have either? So we made a deal that she would pay off the little bit left so I could get the new iPhone 7, and we'd turn in her phone and use that money she'd get mine, and we'd use the money to get her an Apple Watch. Well, she got an Apple Watch, used it a little while, and really felt like it made her a lot healthier. So of course, what does a loving wife do? She buys one for me and for my son. So I now have, see, look with envy. Cool, isn't it nice? My favorite thing to do with it is you can do Apple Pay. Does anybody here do Apple Pay with your phone? So you walk up to the register, and now almost a third of businesses, statistics say, and you hold your phone over it and you pay. It's even better with your phone. You tap a little button and it arms the Apple Pay thing and it's ready. So you arm it and you go up to the register, and if you're really brave, what you do is when they ring it up and they say that'll be $13.95, you go, I'm a little short. Can you give me just a minute? And you hold your arms out over the terminal and you go, Lord, can you please send the funds for this meal and ding, and anyway, revival breaks out and repentance. It's awesome. A watch is just an extension of your phone, but it's still in its own way is a little bit revolutionary. There are other things coming. Anybody, virtual reality, anybody got the little headset where you can't see anything but this world? There's a thing that I like more called augmented reality, Google Glass. Anybody familiar with that? Everybody know the term for people that wore them, the term they coined for that? Glass holes. Because who wants to hang around with somebody with that on their face? Augmented reality is what that did. So you have the world in front of you. I had a little app once. It was the first augmented reality app. It was called Type and Walk. So you need to text while you're walking. It would open your phone's camera so that you could see what was ahead of you, and it would put the letters on top of the screen so you'd be able to see. Augmented reality lets you keep the world you have and add something to it. And what the Google Glass did was actually put information in the upper right-hand corner. You see Devil Wears Prada, that scene where somebody's walking up and the one girl doesn't know who it is, and the other little assistant leans over and goes, that's so-and-so and his wife, and this is the last time you saw him. Think of a LinkedIn profile. Every time you look at a face, their LinkedIn profile's right there for you. Think about when you're driving, the directions aren't in the dash or the cup holder where your phone is. The arrow's actually on the road in front of you because it's augmenting your current world. Awesome things are coming, by the way. The scoop out there on the street is that Apple's working with a German lens manufacturer. So Apple's glasses will look more like this than like that. Maybe it's the Gorilla Glass. Maybe the screen is built in. Maybe there is no big bulge thing on there. It's just normal real wear, and maybe then we can all wear. A lot of great things coming, artificial intelligence, other things. My favorite is the Pentagon is working on this thing where soldiers on missions who have the right kind of helmets can talk to each other without saying a word. They just think about talking and the other people hear. And that is crazy, and it's Pentagon. Well, here's the thing. That guy right there in the middle of that picture is Elon Musk. You might have heard of a couple of his companies. SpaceX, who's delivering payloads into space. Tesla, who's doing cars. He's actually got a company now designed to connect your brain to the internet. And if that's not enough, Facebook just had one of their conferences where one of their CEOs said, we think in the next few years we're confident you'll be able to type 100 words a minute just by thinking about saying those words. Crazy things going on. So what does that mean? Well, it means that change is going to continue. You're not on the mountaintop. Mobile isn't the new thing. Mobile is a passing thing. And so you have to prepare as a business owner. we're going to talk just a couple of minutes about what this means for payments, because I care a lot more about technology than payments, if you picked up on that. People don't care about paying, they care about getting. They want your service, they want your product, they want to have it. They really don't care about the paying for it. And so what we've got to do is try and use technology to make paying better. Technology is going to do three things, I think, to payments. We'll talk about them real quick. It's going to reduce the friction. So it will make paying safer, faster, easier for everybody. Not everything we do with technology makes things faster and easier. You love those? Yeah, it used to be you saw somebody get their checkbook out in line, it was tough. Now if they have a chip card, you know, they're going to be, hold on, yeah, remove card, It's like a 7-8 second process. Mobile payments are inherently better. If you don't do Apple Pay or Samsung Pay, I challenge you to do it. Hook your phone up to it. One of the key things with it is if you go into a Subway and you hand them your card and they swipe it, they have your card data. If they get breached, their systems get breached, they have your card data. You pay with your phone, it's not your card number. It's a number that Visa has worked out called a tokenized thing, and so they have this number that is meaningless. That's what goes through. When it gets to Visa, Visa goes, oh, that's Kevin's card, still charges my card, but I don't have to worry about merchants being breached. Safer for me and so much quicker, and it still amazes the clerks at a lot of stores. It's been around a couple of years, but you still get. I did it yesterday with my watch. I paid somewhere, and the guy was like, man, I've never seen that. Built it myself. Anyway, you get the idea. So this is a way in which technology is reducing the friction. And there's a lot of different vendors out there, a lot of different ways to do it, but we're actually improving the process of checking out. Even to the point where there's a company now that if you have a lot of people who need to pay you and they like to pay you in cash, they can literally go online or on their phone and they can say, hey, I want to make a payment, I want to make it in cash. And it'll send them a barcode. They can walk into a 7-Eleven or a CVS now or an Ace Money store, and they'll scan that barcode, they'll pay the CVS or the 7-Eleven. Instantly, you get the credit for that and their bill's paid. So even paying with cash, there are ways we can reduce the friction. And no more as a trek across town during business hours to do that. Now 24/7 I can do it at a place near me. Payments are also, I think, going to become so convenient that they might literally disappear. Anybody ever order Domino's pizza by texting a pizza slice? You can actually go text the pizza icon to Domino's, and if they've got your order, your standard order on file there, they actually deliver the pizza to you. There's not a point where you say, I'd like to pay now. It's inherent in the process. And the one that does this the best to me, so you land at the Atlanta airport or you land in an airport somewhere and you need a ride. What do? Well, you pull out your Google or your Uber app. And so you look at the Uber app and you tell it where you need to go, and it says, oh, it's going to be about this much, and you go, okay. And so then a car comes, you hop in the car takes you where you're going, you get out. And Uber, through the app on your phone, is tracking you, and when you get to the destination where you are supposed to be, they go ahead and pay the driver. You don't pay the driver, they pay the driver. And so really it's a world in which the paying process is inherent in the actual purchase process to an extent that it disappears to me as a user. I know that I'm paying, but it's not two separate. It's not, I like this shirt, now let me go stand in line for 5 minutes until someone you're paying a very low wage can service me at the cash register and actually walk me through the process. The getting is the thing, and the paying becomes slower. Last thing that I want to talk about is something called contextual commerce. So right now, if you want a thing, the commerce is built on this 3-step process. I want a thing, I get to where I can get the thing, and then I actually buy the thing. And what contextual commerce is doing is, in essence, making the ability to buy things ubiquitous. And so you see this online with buy buttons everywhere, a lot of that. Anybody got the little Amazon buttons at home? So Amazon's making little buttons now you can put like on your washing machine, and you run out of detergent, you push the button and detergent shows up 2 days later at your house. And it's not connected to your PC, it's just a little button that goes. And I don't know about that, but it does seem like there could be uses for that that would be meaningful. I don't know. Conversation is a platform. Lee mentioned it. You can talk to Alexa, you can talk to Siri, you can talk to Google Now, you can talk to Cortana. And if you combine that with something called the Internet of Things, because now it's not just the little buy buttons that are connected to the Internet, all kinds of things, traffic, cameras, there are more and more devices that are connected to the Internet. And I would tell you that within a shorter period of time than any of us think, maybe 3 to 5 years, it is going to be very Jean-Luc Picard, computer, calculate the route. The idea that you will need to carry a device to connect you to the Internet will in essence go away, and the Internet will be around you, and you will talk to it in the most natural way, which is to talk to it. Now, hopefully it understands you a little better than Siri understands me now. I do an awful lot of things with Siri, but occasionally Sheila and I send each other really hysterical texts because we didn't look to make sure she really understood what we had to say. The bottom line for you in business is that the way you're getting money today is likely to change a great deal in the next 3 to 5 years. And if there's nothing you need to run out and do maybe right now, but if you have a smartphone and you could be doing Apple Pay or Samsung Pay, I would at least tinker with that. I would at least have my eyes open. I would at least in my board meeting say, hey, what could we do to make the process of getting our stuff easier for the people who get it? And I think as long as you're aware of what's going on, as long as you, to Lee's point, get rid of your own biases, stop thinking of yourself as on the technological mountaintop, see yourself in the foothills where we really are, then it'll make the path forward for us a whole lot easier as we get there. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Kevin Moland, thank you very much. So as a serial entrepreneur, Kevin has given me a great idea that I'm going to start working right now on the automated filter that automatically takes the information that's coming from your brain and being written, that then sanitizes that into such a mode that it can actually be put out for public consumption. Because I would hate for anything that I'm thinking to actually immediately be where anyone could read it. Okay, welcome back. We have spent the first part of this morning really talking about innovation, about strategic thinking, about innovative thinking and transformational growth. And you heard these speakers talk about technologies and about how we have to sort of expand our minds relative to those. But everything is not about technology. There are a lot of soft skills, a lot of people skills that are integrally a part of innovation. So we've got a second part of the program here that I think you're going to also really like, and we're going to really kind of focus on this other area of innovation, and especially in how we communicate. Our next innovator is Jerry Federico, who is National Product Sales Manager for Jack Henry Associates. Jerry started his entrepreneurship at age 7 with a lemonade stand. Then he fast forward to 1991, where he started his first payment company, which became a leader in the industry and was acquired by Jack Henry in 2004. He has a BA in Business Administration from Whittier College, and also has, is this a doctorate degree? Dr. Jerry Federico. I didn't even know this. This is amazing, from Glendale College of Law. Well, I want me one. He has been speaking for the last 30 years on a variety of business-related subjects and continues his role at Jack Henry Associates to find new and creative ways for JHA to expand their business. Here to share critical conversations from the C-suite. Please join me in welcoming from Waco, Texas, Mr. Jerry Federico.
So based upon what Kevin said, I am standing up, for those of you who are wondering. Okay. And yes, I do know the people who run the Fixer Upper program and generate about 12,000 new people to Waco every week. So we're going to talk a little bit today about innovation, but I want to mention this bottle of water. And I want to have you think that about 20 years ago, if I came into your office and I said, I got this great idea. Let's take water and put it in a bottle and sell it for more than Coca-Cola. How many of you would have invested in that? And how many of you would have thought that doing such a thing, that by 2017, we'd be buying more water in bottles than we do soft drinks? So sometimes the innovation, the value that we put into things that are fairly common are what we're going to be talking about today. Quick story. So my wife's uncle is about 94. He goes out to the farm. He's not supposed to go out to feed his cattle. And he has a bale of hay that looks like this, if we can, whoop, which one am I pushing here? There we go. It's one of these big round bales of hay. And he gets on the back of his pickup truck, and he goes to push the bale of hay off, but the bale of hay wins, pushing him off the pickup truck onto the ground where he breaks his leg. Now, that's a disaster, but I'm going to tell you a couple of things that are actually fairly good for him, and that is that decades before, he had had a hunting accident, so he had no nerve feeling in one of his legs, and that's the leg that he broke, so he's not in pain. He happened to fall off on the driver's side of the truck, and he had left the driver door open, so he's able to crawl onto the truck. Of course, he has no cell phone. So he drives to the end of his farm road in his farm where his good luck has ended because he had closed the gate, and now he can't get out. So as people are driving down the road, he's waving to them for help, and they're waving back. So he ups his game. He beeps his horn and waves, and they beep their horn and they wave. And in fact, it's not until he has that look on his face and he goes like this that somebody actually pulls over, rolls their window down, and he's able to explain to them what actually happened. And they open the gate, and he goes off for medical treatment. Now, I've told this story for a while. I just want you to know that his leg did recover, and he did live to be over 100 years old. So we kind of hope some of that DNA got passed through the family. So what does that mean? What does that bring us to today? It brings us to a question about how do you communicate in your company today? You know, we have email and texting. I love texting, right? I don't know why, because it's one of these things that we're kind of giving our information that we never really seem to be important. You know, like yesterday, I'm on the plane. You know, my wife finds out I landed. You know, I've never told her those things before. I don't know that she particularly cares, but I'm texting those things, right? Either little airplane icons or little hearts. And it's kind of like you don't even pick up the phone anymore. It's like they have this conversation going back and forth. Emails. Any of you have ever gotten an email from somebody and you looked at it and you're a little taken aback by this email? And you said, my God, what is this person saying? Only to find out that maybe they were being sarcastic or maybe they thought they were being humorous. Okay? So sometimes email isn't necessarily the best way to communicate. Of course, now we have WebExes and videos and so forth. You know, one of the most important things that I think about communication, even though I'm going to be sitting here talking to you nonstop for 20 minutes, is listening. But I will tell you, one of the things that every speaker does is that we listen by looking at our audience and being able to read your body language. Next time you go to an airport, watch somebody that's on their phone or any place that people are using their phone. Look at their body language. You can tell whether the conversation is funny, they're smiling, whether they agree or disagree with the person on the other end. But the person on the other end does not see that. In fact, if we had done this with new technology called the WebEx, I wouldn't be seeing any of you. I wouldn't know whether some of you were texting or watching your emails or anything. So sometimes all of this great technology that we have that we think is helping with communication and it's supposed to make things lively is kind of like water that we've been taking for granted, but we need to add value to it. And so here's an idea. Here's what I think we should be doing about innovation. We should actually meet and talk with your individuals in person. So let me tell you where this comes from. So I had a small company. We've been building up. We got to about 75 employees when my admin comes into me and says, hey, Jerry, you know, we got a lot of new employees. I said, yeah, that's right. And like all employers, we had hired, middle management. We had hired supervisors. We had talked to them. We told them what we wanted to do. And we kind of felt that message was going down. Well, she said, all these people that have come in, they don't know who you are. And she goes, they know who you are, of course, but they don't know who you are. I've worked for you for 3 years. And we did some investigation, and we found out that kind of the philosophical thing that had built the company, how we wanted to treat employees, how we wanted to treat our customers, wasn't necessarily getting all the way down. And it reminded me of a quote. When I was in college, I was fortunate enough to be editor of my college paper. And in those days, it dates me a little bit, but I had the opportunity to interview the then Governor Reagan of California. And the governor said that the one thing that he had to learn was you cannot mandate certain processes down through a company or through a state. As a leader, you think you can mandate, but you can't. But you can inspire. And so we got together and we said, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to get this information out to all of our employees? And I talked to my brother, and I mentioned it to him in general, and he said, Jerry, you've played football, a little high school and college. I was a running back, if you can't tell. Fast in those days. I mean, in those days, 250-pound guy was considered huge, okay? We did not have leather helmets. We had the plastic helmets. All right, just, okay. So he said, and as a coach, as a player, think about how you communicate. A coach talks to his team every day, twice maybe, before. You have films. You practice separately, linemen and defensive backs practice, but they come together as a team, and you always understand the mission. As you get ready to prepare for a game, you start to understand what you want to do for that particular game. And you look at what you've done in the past as a team, and the head coach pushes this philosophy down at that level, even through his assistants that start to read that. So think about doing a coaching. And in our case, what we did was we formed what we then called the President's Club. And it was called the President's Club because that was my title, and I took ownership of it, but you can call it anything that you want. And what we decided to do was meet once a month, and we broke our company in half. We had about 75 employees, and we forced certain type of rules for that meeting. So for example, you had to take half a staff from each one of the little vertical groups that we all have in our company. By the way, if you have 75 people, you think they all know each other. I will tell you they don't. And they had to sit next to people that they didn't work with. And the first time we did this, I basically served them lunch. I actually made lasagna for them. Now, I'm Italian, so cooking for 75 people is easy. You know, none of my mother's recipes are for less than 20. Okay, so it came with meatballs and sausage and salad and cannoli for dessert. So we fed them. But what I explained to them was I was feeding them, I was giving them that food because my job as president was to empower them, was to serve them. And I will say that is your job. Your job is to empower them to get the job done. How many of you have open door policies? You all have open door policies? Okay. Well, I grew up as a Catholic. We had confession. There was a reason they had that little door and a little screen, okay, between when you knelt down and the priest. For those of you who've never been in a confessional, they weren't supposed to know who you were. I remember one time during a retreat, the confessional line was pretty much lined up. I went to an all-boys school. You can imagine how long the line was. Okay. And a priest just walks up in line and says, okay, come on, Johnny, I'll hear your confession. Starts to walk across the deck. Everybody scatters. Okay. It doesn't have an open door policy. Nobody's going to walk in your office, cross the moat, and tell you what's going on. But you need to empower them. You need to tell them that that's what you want to do. And the other thing we created was an Employee of the Month. And as a coach and as a player, I will tell you that when you pick captains, you can pick them two ways. You can have the coach pick them, or you can have the team pick them. And as a player and a coach, it's always better when the team picks them. So we put out a little ballot, and we had the employees basically nominate people that they thought should be Employee of the Month. They got a little trophy, they got $100, and I will tell you, whoever won that thought they won the lottery. It was one of the most exciting things. And you would learn from their employees incredible things. Not just what they did at work, but also basically what they did to help other employees outside of work. And you could tell those stories. So he had Employee of the Month. The other thing we did was we told everything that was going on in the business, good or bad. I go back to my coaching days. When you're showing a film and you show somebody that missed the block and you criticize for them for that, it's not unlikely that 4 plays later they've made a key play and you praise them for that. And now what happened is you had the opportunity to basically get all of this information out there through all of your employees. And they start hearing from you what is important. For instance, back in those days, we had what's now called flex time. We didn't call it flex time. We didn't know what it was. But now, because it was coming from me, a middle supervisor could not get on to an employee for being what they would have called 15 minutes late when I was saying they could show up there. So you start to get that attitude from the top going all the way through your entire organization. And I think that is part of one of those things that is really important. As a running back, we always understood the importance of linemen. When I was in high school, I bought a lot of hot dogs. When I was in college, I bought a lot of beer. They protected you. When you do these meetings, you are now able to do it in a way that you can now praise the linemen. How many people in your organization just go in and do their job every day? And who gets the glory? It's usually us people that are in sales. We get to dance in the end zone. We come in with a big contract. Everybody says, wow, they got the big contract, which we would never have gotten without a whole bunch of other support and people that are out there. Within Jack Henry, we have 6,000 employees. Only 250 of us are in sales. Okay? There isn't a time that doesn't go on that when I'm on the phone with travel department or other technical people that I don't try to take a moment to thank them for what they do to make us successful. This is your opportunity to get out there and to tell those things. We had a lady that was our receptionist that gave a $150 refund to a customer that really wasn't her job. And in fact, it wasn't really our customer. We processed payments. And so one of the companies we processed for was no longer in business, but we were still responsible. And on her own impression, or her own intention of talking to this person on the phone, knowing the person that would normally do refunds was on the phone, she said, don't worry, ma'am, I'll get you the refund. Walked into my office and proudly called my bluff, said, okay, you said you needed to empower me. You just empowered me to give a $150 refund. At the next meeting, not only did we tell that story, but we gave her a $200 bonus for taking the chance of doing that. That's the way you empower. Why do we go into a business and ask for the owner or the manager? Because we think they're empowered to do something that an employee is not. Don't do that. Empower your employees. Get them down there. So here's what I tell you to do in summary. You want to set up a regular meeting. Now, we tried this every month. We never set a date. We just rotated it upon the middle of the month because of travel, but we did it every month. We did try to go to quarterly meetings. I don't think quarterlies work, okay? And it's not a newsletter. It's you standing in front of your team telling them what's going on in your organization that's good and bad, okay? You blend your team. You get all the different people from the different departments sitting with each other. One of the important things as an Italian is you feed them. People listen better on a full stomach. You know, as growing up as an Italian, to become an Italian man, truly, you had to sit at dinner with about 20 people. You had to have 3 conversations going on at the same time, 2 of which had to be arguments, okay, while you're eating. All right? So you want to feed them, want them to feel comfortable, okay? You want to have an employee of the month, voted on by them. You'll find incredible things going on in your organization that you may not be thinking about. And you want to have a game plan. Okay, you want to be able to go into that meeting every month with telling them what had happened good and what is going to be going on in the future. It's important for you to lay that groundwork down so that your employees have a full understanding of your organization and what your goals are. Again, when you think of a football team, when they have their game meetings, the defense is sitting in the same room with the offense. So when the defensive strategy is being laid out of what they're going to do, the offense is hearing that, and vice versa. So when they go out on the field, even though they have different, diverse jobs to do, the whole team understands what's going on. And if any of you have ever played on a team where a substitute has come in to fill in a position, one of the biggest challenges you have as a coach is to make sure that the other 10 players don't try to overreact to that person because they don't trust that person and they want to cover for that person, and consequently they don't do their job well. By blending your teams, they start to understand how important each part of your company is. Something doesn't get sold, you don't get revenue. But if whatever gets sold doesn't get shipped, you don't have revenue, you don't have happy customers. If people call in and they don't get the phone answered properly, these things all tie together. And there isn't one that's more importantly than the other, but the group together gives you that type of satisfaction. Now, for those of you that are sitting here thinking, Jerry, this is great, but I mean, it's just filling water. It's just putting water in a bottle. This can't possibly have that much value. Let me tell you 2 quick stories that will validate this. First, we are in Waco, where Baylor University is, and we had an intern come in who basically her job that summer was to interview all our employees. We did not know what the questions were, could not see the responses. They had to be totally anonymous. When she went back to college that fall, the professor called my partner and I up and came to our office, said, I got to take you guys to lunch. He said, we've been doing this survey now for about 15 years. We've done 500 companies around the country, because interns go all over the country in the summer. We've never had a company rated as high as you guys. We got to ask you, what are you doing, and what the heck is this President's Club? Because of the type of communication and the involvement it is. The second thing is a little bit more embarrassing, but we processed lots of payments. We were processing 50,000 payments from a company out in Florida that, unbeknownst to us, because we didn't have the technology at the time, it blended in about 3,000 or 4,000 payments a month that they shouldn't have been doing, because we originated it when the FBI and the FDIC and the FTC decided to investigate. It was our office that they raided. And of course, in Waco, we do have a reputation to dealing with FBI and ATF. But anyway, they came into the office, they hurdled us all into the deal. Then the very next day, that night, basically Paul and I had gotten together. The next day, we met with the employees, and we told them, look, here's the deal. We've got severance packages lined up for anybody that wants to leave. We'll write letters of recommendation to anybody who wants to leave, and we will help you get unemployment if you need to. We did not have one employee that took us up on that. In fact, I can proudly tell you that I had over 12 people come into my office that day to ask me how I was feeling, and that they weren't going to go because they knew what we did as a company. They knew that it wasn't right. Okay, and they stood by us that entire time. Ladies and gentlemen, that doesn't happen, okay, just because you decide that you haven't talked to them for 3 years, now you have an issue, now you bring them in a room and you say, hey, I need your help. Okay? The football coaches that are known for those halftime talks that get their teams motivated, that's not the first time they've ever talked to their team. You think Newt Rockne just happened to think, of the Gipper talk, and he called Lee Wetherington, what should I do? Give him the Gipper talk, No, you couldn't win one for the lead. It wouldn't make no sense, okay? But that's what happens. You get used to talking to your people, and they get used to talking to you. And they tell you things that you will not believe they will tell you, because the conversation becomes both ways. They understand that you truly want to listen to them and you want to empower them. Ladies and gentlemen, think about this and transform your organization, not through mandate, not through memorandum, not through text, not through email, but through inspiration. And you will find that you too will have that bottle of water, that value within your organization. And you will see a transformation in your employees and their attitude towards your customers, and they will all become owners, and they will treat everybody in the organization as you want them to. Thank you very much.
Jerry, that was awesome. I have to tell you, while he was talking about this idea of CEO communication, I couldn't help but think about some specific times that as CEO of Gold Leaf Technologies that I really tried to espouse. I really tried to embrace this idea that he had of getting around and talking to people, and we had a lot of these same kind of meetings. But I want to caution you that if you're a CEO and you start getting around to folks, you need to give clear instructions. So this is what would happen. I would be sitting with a group of programmers, and we'd be sitting around and talking about the electronic banking software we're writing. And invariably, I might say something like, it'd be cool. It'd be cool if the software could do this, right? And I describe some kind of feature, right? It's just kind of a throwaway comment, whatever. So 3 months later, I'm sitting down with the vice president of development, and we're talking about the time frame for when the next release of the software is going to be available. He says, well, we're going to be a little bit delayed. Well, what do you mean we're going to be delayed? Well, because we're programming that thing that you added. What? What? What thing I added? Whatever. Yeah, remember you were in the meeting and I said, I didn't say go do that. I said it would be cool if we could do that, right? So sometimes as the CEO, and if you're not careful, you're giving unintentional instructions to folks when in fact you're just trying to make conversation, right? So you need to give, so I learned that I need to tell people, you're not doing this, but it would be cool. You're not doing anything that your manager doesn't instruct you, but wouldn't it be nice, right? So just make sure that you give those clear instructions and have those crucial conversations. Okay, now, let's suppose that you really embrace this, from the CEO, but what about all of those other folks? As we look across who our employees, who our staff, who our future leaders are going to be, how do we find, attract, and retain the very best that are going to be the leaders of our company? So we now have somebody who's going to come and give us that piece of the innovation talk. Cachet Prescott is an in-demand corporate trainer and speaker, empowering individuals, teams, leaders, entrepreneurs, and organizations to make shift happen. She owns Shift Matters. Let me try that again. She owns Shift Matters, the coaching and training firm specializing in the power of personal leadership and transformational thinking in individual and organizational success. She's a visionary trailblazer with the human side of the workplace at the helm of her work. This double-certified HR professional and IO practitioner will provide a fresh perspective on recruitment and retention to supercharge transformational growth in any organization. Here to share her presentation, Make the Shift, Rethinking Recruitment and Retention to Achieve Transformational Growth. Please help me welcome to the stage, Cachet Prescott.
Now, I want you all to take a quick moment to imagine with me. I'm not going to ask you to close your eyes, but just think about if you're an employer and you have what is seemingly the ideal resume that just all of a sudden appears before you. You look at this resume and you are just entranced by that 12-point Calibri font as it sings to you about this person's background, about the things that they can do for your organization, and what they can bring to you. And so you decide to take a chance and you reach out to this person and you schedule the interview. So the person comes into your office and then you all lock eyes across the office, not in a weird kind of way. But you lock eyes and they walk toward you and she offers you a firm handshake. And before sitting down, she hands you a copy of her resume just in case you didn't have your own. And then you all sit down and engage in the most intriguing conversation. She whispers the sweet nothings of who she is, how she can help your organization, what she can do for you, how she can best serve your organization. She is just whispering those sweet nothings in your ear. And you all come to a place and space of understanding where you feel like that's the right fit. So after the conversation is over, you call and you decide to make it official. You offer the position, and then she comes and she does exactly what she said she was gonna do and exceeds your expectations. She fits in with everybody. She's a great cultural fit. People love her. And you all just have increased productivity, increased profits. It's a match made in heaven. And so for the next few years, you enjoy organizational and professional bliss. If only it really worked that way. Now, in most cases, resumes like that don't just automatically appear on your desk. And if they do, you need to tell me your secret. Because there's a lot of people out there that are having problems with finding qualified candidates. For almost 50% of small business owners, the reality is that they feel that they can't find qualified candidates. And what I mean by qualified is that they don't have the specific skill set to meet the needs of particular industries. But the issue is whether this is your story or it is not your story. You need to pay attention to the conversation taking place. You can't control the job market. You can't control the people that are out there that are looking for jobs. You can't control who comes your way. The part you have control over, though, is the process of recruitment. How are you connecting with these people? How are you telling them about yourselves? How are you drawing them into your organization? And so my challenge for you is really and truly to rethink how you do recruitment and get those people in the door, and ultimately what you do to end up keeping them under your roof. Because now we live in a day and age where it's a very different job market. Two main things you need to know about the job market are, first, there's been a generational shift. As of 2015, millennials are the largest percentage of the workforce at 35%, or between 35 and 42%, depending on what studies you look at. They have well surpassed the baby boomers in the workplace, and so now, the people that you're going to be looking to in handing the reins over for leadership or for any position are going to be those millennials. And then it's also going to be the people that are in Gen Z that are following behind them. And these are the kids right now that are in high school. And there's also Generation Alpha and so forth and so forth. So are you really in tune as to what it is that they're looking for in their workplaces? Because it's very different than what baby boomers look for in the workplace or what Gen Zers look for in the workplace. So you need to know this information so you can make an informed decision about how to proceed and get them into your workplace as well. The next thing you need to know about today's market or job market is that it is candidate driven. That means that the applicants have the upper hand in the situation. They are being selective about the employers that they choose to pursue. And they're being selective about the jobs that they choose to go after. We live in a gig economy. So if someone feels that they can't find employment with a traditional organization or company, they just go create the gig. We have things like Fiverr, Upwork, freelancing, all kinds of opportunities for people to do work on their own to get by, become an Uber driver. People are not rushing into opportunities anymore. I have a good friend of mine who has been in IT for years on end. He's been unemployed for the past 2 years or so, and he is not in any rush to just take any job. He got laid off at his job 2 years ago, and he has been biding his time by just doing freelancing, contracting on the side. He's also done Uber himself. He's in no rush to just go to any employer. Another friend of mine, she's a marketing person. Same thing for her. She's been unemployed for probably the past year and a half. Same thing in her case. She's not in any rush to just take any opportunity. And so you need to figure out what it is that will get you to connect with people that are extremely qualified, but they want to come to you. They want to come to you as the employer of choice. So we're going to talk about what it looks like to rethink recruitment and rethink retention. So what does it look like to become more savvy in your recruitment efforts? So when you think about recruitment, again, we have to keep in mind there's been a generational shift and that is candidate driven. So what does that mean? So Estel talked to you all about the power of social media, and that's going to play heavily in the recruitment efforts at this point in time. You have to make the move from traditional recruitment, which is just posting a job, waiting for the applications to roll in, looking at the ATS and seeing what's happening, or your applicant tracking system and seeing what's happening, do some interviews, make a choice. That's not what it looks like anymore. People are looking to connect with you on a deeper level. They want to know more about you as an organization and how you connect with their values, their ideals, their beliefs. Why are you an employer of choice? They want to know what your employer brand is. And in this day and age, it's important for you to be clear about what that is and for the people that work for you to be just as crystal clear. And so in establishing that employer brand, you have to make it simple for you to be able to be found. So this information can be on your website. It could be on your careers page. You can also do this on social media. Great ways to reach out to people via social media might be something like doing a Q&A, a weekly Q&A on a platform like Periscope, just to answer questions about job openings you might have. You can post pictures about your workplace culture on Instagram or Facebook. People want to see the softer side of the workplace. It's not about the technical side anymore, because you as the employer, you can find people with technical skills. And them as the employee or potential employee, they know that, they can go and do the job. But it's about the quality of life factor now that really counts for the people in today's workplace. So how are you making it clear what the quality of life would be in your workplace? I also challenge you to make use of your valuable resources, and that's the current employees that you have. Have them serve as your advocates. These are your internal customers. Have them be the people that go and advocate on your behalf. Share information about you on their social media pages if they're willing to do so. They don't have to. Or have them record videos like a day in a life of, this is what I do in my workplace. Show the softer side, show the human side of the workplace, because that's what counts to people more. Now, not to say that salary doesn't, but they also want to know, in addition to salary, in addition to benefits, what do I get as a person? They want to see the holistic side of the workplace. And then another thing to consider in your recruitment efforts is also the passive candidates. So it might be the people that aren't necessarily looking for a job. They may be employed elsewhere, but they are looking for opportunities, because the reality is that 69% of candidates are looking for jobs within 3 months of taking on or starting a new position. And 85% of candidates are looking at least once a month. Even though they might be working, they're still looking at least once a month to see what other opportunities are out there. So people are still looking. People are willing to come and join you if you show yourself to be an employer of choice. Now, when you get your ideal candidates, what is it that you're doing to keep them in your office? And that's when you need to rethink your retention process. And as Jerry said, engagement is one of the key factors that's going to help you in keeping people happy. People want to communicate with you. They want to know leadership. They want to actually talk to leadership, have conversations with leadership. They don't want to just be, they don't want to have the Wizard of Oz experience where it's that person behind the green curtain that they never see, but they hear so much about. They want to talk to people one-on-one. They want to get to know, like, and trust you, the KLT factor. And that's a term used in marketing where people buy from businesses and organizations that they know, like, and trust. Same thing in leadership, same thing in building any kind of relationship. When people get to know you, they can make an informed decision about liking you as a person and then eventually trust you as a person. And so you have to take the time to engage people, talk to them, see who they are, learn their names. There are leaders out there that have no idea who the people are that work for them, just simply by name. Have conversations, engage them. And then also, in this type of job market, you need to talk to the people about how they're doing. They want more informal feedback, not just the annual performance review. They want more feedback throughout the course of the year. It could be a once a week type thing. Hey, this is what's going on. The coaching, the mentoring, the just giving direction. Another thing you need to take the time to do is just develop your people. Set them up for success. Help them help you, because when they operate at their best, they can give you their best, and the organization its best. People want the opportunity to move beyond the skill sets that they have. They want the opportunity to learn more information. And if you are in a place and space where the candidates in your particular market may not necessarily be as qualified, you may need to consider just giving the people that already work within your organization more skills to be able to do the jobs that you need to get done. So that might be a consideration, or you may consider bringing someone in, but having to do a little more OJT, or on-the-job training. But these are things you have to think about when it really comes to filling those positions, because you need to fill those positions. You lose money as the time goes on, but there's nothing worse and nothing more costly than putting the wrong person into the position. And finally, with the retention piece, you also need to make sure, again, to empower your people. And this is something that Jerry said as well. Empower them with the tools. Give them the ability to make choices, make decisions, to add their feedback into a conversation. Allow them to bring their entrepreneurial ideas into the workplace and really think outside the box and take ownership of the situation. Because when people take ownership, they become much more invested in your organization and what you're doing, and they buy into your vision, and they want to help you get there because they feel a part of it. So my challenge to you is to really take these things and keep them in mind when you sit down to discuss your recruitment or your retention plan. and to understand what it is that you need to do in order to think outside the box and get those qualified candidates. It's not that they don't necessarily exist, but are you doing your part to really connect with them? You need to know who they are and where to find them and what platforms you can find them on. And again, engage them in a human way, because that's what today's job candidate market is looking for. They're looking for a human experience. They're looking for an overall candidate experience where you are making it easy for them from start to finish in finding you, engaging with you, connecting with you, talking to you, getting to know, like, and trust you, and then eventually, hopefully, becoming your employee. Now, my last question for you is, how does your organization measure up? When you think about where you are with recruitment and retention, what are some of the things you might need to work on? What are some areas that you are doing extremely well in? What are some things that you could potentially implement? Is your workforce reflective of the people that you serve, your external clients? Do the people that work for you look like them? Because that does make a difference. Do you have representation from all of the generations in your hiring decisions? Are you including your people in the hiring process and getting feedback from everyone and not making it just a conversation between one person and candidate and having that subjective conversation? Think about these things and answer this question honestly so that you know how to move forward and supercharge the innovation in your recruitment and retention efforts. Thank you for your time.
Give the clicker to Ken. Give the clicker to Ken. Awesome. Cachet, thank you very much. So here's the thing. I start this software company. I'm a programmer by trade. And I started this software company. In our heyday, we had about 85 people working in various different buildings around Hayhira. And almost inevitably, there'd be an opportunity with somebody from the community. You know, maybe Myrna would come, and there would be some people, and they'd say, hey, we want to come visit Gold Leaf Technologies. And so we go in, and here's what the tour basically would be like. Here's a really smart person writing software. They're in that cube. Here's a really smart person in that software. They're right. So, I mean, you get the idea. It's just like there's just a bunch of people, you know, typing on keyboards. There's not really a whole lot of things to see. And I always felt bad because I love manufacturing. If I could go see if I right now could go to Saft and just walk through that factory and see all the stuff, fascinated. Not long ago, Jimmy Watley took me out to the farm, and he's coming up with a way to make these microbes that actually help plants grow faster. And we're out there in the field, and he's talking about the equipment and all the stuff. The idea that somebody like somebody in agribusiness or Saft, if they're going to stay in business, they're going to have maintenance on the equipment. They're going to make sure that things are greased, that products are kept up to date, and so forth. But when you're in a people-intensive business, the maintenance, the equivalent of the grease and the updated belts and hoses is education, is the opportunity for people to go and get additional learning, additional education. And what I found was more than money, the people in my organization valued that they could go get this Microsoft certification, or that they could go to this conference where they were going to meet other similar people. And then when you have these people come in like Cachet's talking about, and they're talking to some of those other employees, they're going to be imparting to these potential hires about how much money this company invests in the maintenance of their people. And again, that's a big part of what they're looking for. Cachet, thank you. Thank you very much. Great job. All right. 2 years ago, I opened my LinkedIn InMail, and I've got a message in there from Kent Gustafson. I don't know who Kent Gustafson is from Adam's House Cat. And I said, who is this person, whatever. And I read this message, and the way that the message was written caused me to reach out to this individual. And we've started now a 2-year relationship where Kent has, for those of you who know, I wrote a book called Grounded, but Kent was really inspirational to me in changing the way that I was going to put that book out that made it infinitely better. If any of you read my blogs or see the other things that I do on social media, it is only good looking or inspirational because of the work of Kent's company behind the scenes that actually makes all of that work out. He has been truly inspirational to me, and I'm really proud that we were able to bring him here from College Station, Pennsylvania, to talk to you today. Dr. Kent Gustafson grew up at the feet of a poet and a pediatrician, his parents. Since he began speaking, he has been doing his best to find the thread between poetry and science. As a founder of an award-winning independent book publisher, Kent has published hundreds of titles and has ghostwritten more than 50 books over the past dozen years. He has achieved over 100 million views on social media and is an award-winning author in his own right and has coached, taught, and mentored thousands of speakers and authors worldwide. He has spoken on the TED stage and has been featured on NPR and in the pages of Entrepreneur magazine. And when no one's watching, he plays the banjo. Here to encourage us to get crazy, please give a warm welcome to educator, publisher, speaker, and ne'er-do-well, Dr. Kent Gustafson.
Crazy? Are you crazy? All right, so who has had someone call them crazy recently? Okay, who called you crazy? The wife. Okay, wife. Anybody's grandkids, kids call them crazy? Employees? Raise your hands. Employees called you crazy? David. Right, okay. Are you crazy? You said yes, but do you really mean it? What kind of crazy? Unpredictable. Okay. Are you crazy? I heard you earlier. You seem... All right. Now, how about really crazy? Are you crazy? Are you crazy? Seriously. Yes. Have you shouted that at another car or somebody doing something nuts? Okay. Have you ever used "Are you crazy" in a bad way? Maybe. All right. So I'm going to define crazy in certain ways, and I see it as impact, influence coming together, cash and change. Can you do both things? And we're going to talk about getting crazy in different ways. So 50 years of crazy? Oh no, 450 years, half a millennium of crazy. How did the word start out? The word crazy started as cracked. Cracked. There's cracks in something, right? It's full of crazes. And then it became insane, terrible. And then in the 20s, in the jazz scene, it was like crazy, right? It became cool. Crazy as a fox. I'm crazy about you. And we're reclaiming crazy. Now it means passionate. It's crazy good. Crazy bad, crazy good. It's a superlative. I'm crazy in love. So it has all these meanings, but it started as diseased or sickly, full of cracks. And now it's this incredible superlative. So today I'm going to encourage us to look at crazy in 3 different ways. The first way is to think crazy. Double your value without doing all that much different. The second one is to act crazy, to look at structures and freedom, and to decide how we can get more freedom by actually creating more structure. It's a paradox. And then the fact that crazy matters. It's cash and change. It's doing impact and getting income. And you can change yourself and change the world. So the first way to get crazy today is to bifurcate your USP. Has anybody seen a bifurcated tongue? Come on, raise your hands. You've seen a bifurcated tongue. What is it? It's a snake tongue. Come on down here. You've got poisonous snakes, don't you? Okay, raise your hand for a bifurcated tongue. I see like 4 hands. Nobody's seen one? Okay, all right. So, oh yeah, David has a bifurcated tongue. So what is a USP? How do you bifurcate a USP? Unique selling proposition, USP. Did any of you have a USP for your business? I'm going to start pointing. Do you have a USP for your business? Advocate, build, beautiful. Do you have a USP for your business? No? Awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna give you 15 seconds. Talk to your neighbor, and I'm gonna count, like 14, 13. I want you to talk to your neighbor about your unique selling proposition for your business. So if you don't necessarily have one, think about, okay, what is the core of my business? What am I selling? Okay, 15 seconds. 14. Talk quick. Five seconds. Talk fast. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so now convert the USP for your business. Now think about yourself. I'm looking at it. I see what you're wearing. I see your hairdo. I see your shoes. That's your USP, isn't it? Your personal brand. How many of you feel like you've got a really good personal brand? Okay. Some humble, modest people. How many of you looked in the mirror this morning? Raise your hand. Okay, all right. So you're engaging your brand, right? So when I talk about bifurcating your USP, think about your personal brand, think about your company brand, both at the same time, because it's important. So, can you recognize these two fellas? Anybody? Shout them out. Beethoven, all right. He's on the left, right? Yes. And Woody Guthrie on the left side. So you know, this land is your land, this land is my land. Everybody know that song? Okay. We know the song, This Land Is Your Land. Guess what? My wife, who is German, she knows the song from when she was in school, because they learned it in German schools. It's a famous song, This Land Is Your Land. Do you know Woody Guthrie? Have you heard stories about him? What have you heard? What have you heard about Woody Guthrie?
Well, that he wrote that song.
Okay.
I mean, he was very much for individual freedom.
Where is he from? California, Oklahoma? Absolutely. He's from the West. He was a hobo, the Dust Bowl. You remember all these things maybe sometime in the past? He's well known as Woody Guthrie, and he's well known for his song, This Land Is Your Land. The guy on the right, do you know anything about Beethoven? He was deaf? Yeah. A genius, absolutely. How about, can anybody sing anything from Beethoven? Bum, 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 Fifth Symphony. All right. Bum, 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 bum. Ninth Symphony, right? He wrote when he was deaf. Well, these guys are crazy, right? You agree? Literally, they walked through the streets the last decade of their lives. In New York City, Woody Guthrie, and in Vienna, Beethoven, as crazy guys who would hum to themselves and they'd be led by someone else, or Beethoven was known to have a chamber pot under his piano unemptied, right? Crazy people that go down through history. So how about this guy? Who's this guy? Also crazy, right? Heard anything about him? Okay, so he's staring past his little device there, right? How many in this room have not owned an Apple device? Raise your hand. Never. No Apple device, ever. That's extraordinary. Give him a round of applause. It is extraordinary. But my point is that we have been touched by this guy's inventions, regardless of whether you know who the guy is, right? But Steve Jobs, we know all these stories about him. There's a great story I know about, well, I can't tell you, but there are all kinds of things we know about him, and quotes and this and that. We know Steve Jobs and we know Apple. And the two things build each other up. Okay, so when we talk about bifurcating your brand, think about Spider-Man and two walls. Spider-Man uses the two walls to go up, right? He uses both sides. If he only has one wall, he has to figure out how to have suction cups or something like that. If you have two walls, you can get up the side of it. How about if you're driving through the night and you have a second driver? That helps a lot. If you have a second driver, that's like having your bifurcated brand. You've got two things to work from, your Steve Jobs and your Apple, your Woody Guthrie and This Land Is Your Land. So the second get crazy point I've got is the paradox of structure and freedom. So what does a structured life look like? You get up in the morning, you're regimented, you brush your teeth, you comb your hair, you go to work, you park in some spot, right? Maybe it's a spot that's assigned to you. It's a structure. And within that structure, where's the freedom? What are you free to do? What are you free to do? Now, I work from home, so I have my dog at my feet. I'm free to pet my dog. How about you? Can you bring your dog to work? We all have different sets of structures and rules and all these things around us, and we've got the freedom, and it's a paradox. The more structure you have to a certain point, the more freedom you can have. Because if you're happy that you're married, then you can go and hang out with all kinds of people and not be worried about people flirting with you, right? If you know where you're going to park, then you don't have to add that extra 10 minutes of commuting time. So, how free are you every day? Talk to your neighbor again, 10 seconds, and I'm going to count, the clock's going to go really fast. 10 seconds. Where is your freedom every day? How free are you? 10 seconds. Three, two, one. Okay, so give me a moment of freedom. Anybody? Moment of freedom. Where are you most free? All the time. I love that. Okay, where are you most free? In the car. There's great freedom in the car, right? You have the structure of this commute or of this time. Absolutely. So, but thinking about how free you are, where the structures are, where the freedom is important. Now, let's talk about generations and the workplace, kind of like Cachet was talking about. In the new workplace, you might not be sitting in an office, in a cubicle. You might not be, when I was at the airport, I had a guy talk to me through the video screen at Hertz rental cars. Have you had that happen? It's strange. It's a disembodied head talking to you, right? But it was awesome. And he had kind of a background behind him of like the Bahamas with a green screen. Structures are changing. It gives that guy freedom to be able to work from home or from wherever his town is and still have a great job. It gives me the freedom to come into the airport and have 10 different people waiting on me. It's fantastic. So freedom needs structure. But how about the structure needs freedom? Structure needs freedom. Because if you're not free, if your company doesn't have freedom, if you don't have millennials, if you don't have passion, there's nothing. There's no innovation. There's no ingenuity. Nothing great will happen. So, millennials. I have an employee who lives in Bali. She's one of my best people. I have employees in Europe, Colombia, all over the world, California, the Midwest. Why should I care? Do I really need to breathe down their neck? Why not engage with people the way they'd like to be engaged? Because I get the best work out of them. And they're happy, they'll stick around. So think about the structure and freedom paradox. The third one is matter. I mean that like a imperative. Matter. Matter. Is that important to you? Do you want to matter? Who wants to change the world? You mean you used to want to change the world as kids? Do you still want to change the world today? Absolutely. I hope so. Don't give up on it. A teacher can see all the time, every day. How many of you can say that? Not quite as many, but you should. Matter. So I've got a quick story to tell. It's the Arabic story of the origin of music. So that instrument right here is the one to kind of keep in mind. So there's this guy, his name was Lamach. And Lamach got to be very, very old, even older than David. No, he got to be 150 years old. And he and his wife, as the story goes, had no children. And he thought, this is just not fair. And his wife was not 20 years old. She was actually also 150 years old, as the story goes. But they kept getting older and older and had no luck with children. And finally, he had a son. And he was so happy and spent every day with his little son. And Lamech was truly overjoyed. And unfortunately, after a year and a half, his son died. And he was so sad, his life was entirely over, that he took his son's body, he hung it up in a tree, and he mourned. He sat in a chair, and he watched his son's body melt away until it was only bones in the tree. And Lamech went up, and he took down the leg bone and the foot. And he put it down on his knee, and he strung a string from it, and he played the first song. And that's the origin of music in Arabic tradition. And that right there looks just like a leg and a foot. And even in Italian, you hear about viola da gamba. Gamba means leg. So an instrument is literally like a leg with a foot. Why do I tell this story, this intense story of taking a body part and turning it into music? Because we have to take the bones of something we love and look at them and create something that matters, right? You all said you were crazy. I heard you say it. If you're crazy and you want to do something that matters, then do it. Right? Take the leg out of the tree, string it up, and play the music. So, we've got thinking crazy. Bifurcate your USP. Think about your business and think about your own story at the same time. Act crazy. Think about structure and freedom and how they play against each other and how important structure is in our personal lives and in our companies, and how it gives us freedom. And then change yourself and the world. Do things that matter. You can still do that. So I'm going to do something you're not supposed to do and pull a little slip of paper out of my pocket. But there's an advertisement that Apple ran in 1997. So we started out with Steve Jobs. This is attributed to Steve Jobs. It wasn't written by him, but it was written by Apple. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them. Because they change things. They push the human race forward. The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. Let's go back to the definition of crazy. 1566, 1580, before 1600, cracked. Find the cracks. Find the flaws. Find the issues. And like a tree with its big branches spread out, there's little cracks in between the leaves. Find the cracks, you find the space, and let the light shine through.
Excellent. Excellent, excellent. I got to tell you this quick story. So I guess it's been almost a year and a half now. I'm working on this book. And I'm working with Kent, and he and I are going back and forth on the book. And the book basically is two stories. There's a 1979 shipwreck, which is all these things that happened to me and my dad and a friend up until the time. And then this end of the story is the shipwreck. And then there's these stories of two shipwrecks in 1864, 1865, that the shipwreck starts at the beginning, and then it's all of these things that happen while they're on this deserted Auckland Island in the sub-Antarctic Sea. And so we're talking about all of this, and we're trying to figure out some way to kind of make this book really kind of pop. Because this is a business book. There's a lot of people that don't like business books. And Kent says to me, why don't you interleave the chapters? Why don't you just take chapter 1 of the 1979 story, and then chapter 2 will be the first chapter of the 1864 story, and then 79 and 1864, just interleave them. Now, I'm supposed to be this bastion of innovative thinking and creativity, whatever, and my immediate thought was like, that's nuts. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. It's not going to work. There's no way it's going to work. First of all, you're talking about a big jump in time. And the second of all is that the one story has everything that happened and then the shipwrecks at the end, and this story has the shipwreck at the beginning and it's everything that happened. There's no way. And 3 or 4 or 5 times we had this discussion, and Kent was like, David, interleave the chapters. He didn't get excited, he just interleave the chapters. And so I literally, because we have the technology now just to, and I interleave the chapters and then I read through it. And it's like an amazing, wonderful story that reads a little bit kind of like a novel, because it kind of leaves you a little hanging at the end of each one. And people who don't like to read business books have told me that they really enjoy reading this book. But it was only because I was willing to let myself get a little crazy and be open to the idea of how that might work. And so there are things that you might not think are going to work, but try them. You don't necessarily have to roll out something crazy, but don't be afraid to try to actually think differently about how you can do that. All right, so we've had 6 amazing speakers come up here, and I want to kind of wrap this up. So how do you make innovation work for you? Because I've got to believe that there's folks that are here that are listening to this and saying, I'm just not sure how I would specifically apply this in my business. And I really want to give you a couple of just really solid points to think about as we kind of go out of here. The thing that I really want to focus on is this idea of metacognition, thinking about how we think. Thinking about how we think. We do a lot of things every day on autopilot. You are professionals within your businesses, and you perhaps have been many years in your business. And so you do things pretty much in a schedule, right, as you know how to do these things, and you've established as the process about how you go about doing those things. And as I mentioned earlier, somebody comes in and says, hey, why are we doing step 4? And sometimes we get in a knot and say, no, we have to do step 4. And we don't take the time to think about whether or not the things that we are doing today are actually still necessary. I'm fascinated by a story where scientists had basically taken a gorilla in a cage and they hung some bananas way up high and they put a ladder closed up over off to the side. And gorillas are smart, so the gorilla figured out he could get the ladder, open the ladder, go get it, climb up the ladder, get the bananas. They bring in a second gorilla, and very quickly the first gorilla trains the second gorilla how to go up the ladder and get the bananas. Right? They take that gorilla out, and the second gorilla bring in a third gorilla. That second gorilla will train the third gorilla how to go up the ladder, get bananas. They take the second gorilla out. They bring in a fourth gorilla that now has a shock collar on. And so the third gorilla is training the fourth gorilla how to go up and get the bananas. As soon as that fourth gorilla steps on the ladder, they give him a shock. So now he's associating the shock with the fact of going up that ladder and won't go and get the bananas. They take the third gorilla out, bring in the fifth gorilla, and for every other gorilla they bring in, they will train all the rest of the gorillas not to go up the ladder, even though none of the new gorillas coming in have a shock collar. There are things that are going on in your business that are on autopilot with no actual real reason about why they have to happen this way. We just haven't taken the time to sit down and think about, why do we do this? Why are we doing these steps? Is it necessary? And this is where, when we bring in new people to the organization and they observe this, that we need to pay close attention. It is the number one thing that you can do to really bring light, to illuminate these areas of your company or your processes that may stand some scrutiny, is when somebody new comes in and says, why are we doing this? And let me just tell you, there's a thought out there that millennials are just quick to just run and go get another job. They don't stick around too long. Well, you know what I think? I think a lot of millennials are asking questions, why are we doing this? And they're being told, Johnson, step number 4 comes after step 3, and it's before step 5. Shut up and do your work. I think that could be it. And then they go off and they go work somewhere else. We need to identify those areas in our professional lives, in our personal lives, where we are operating on autopilot. And identify what those things are, and then think about those processes. Next, we need to incorporate think time. Think time. We have lost the art of thinking. And in fact, I would go so far to say that those of you here that are business leaders do not value thinking as a part of your professional job. Thinking. Think about the times that you allocate in your calendar. If we could all open up our PDAs and look at our calendar, tell me how much time you have blocked off your calendar this week, not including this Innovation Summit, to think. Where you literally had assigned time to think. Now, I mentioned earlier that innovation starts with creativity. There's really no innovation without being creative. But how do we come up with creative ideas? Do you think that you're just sitting around your office doing all the things you normally do and then creativity comes? Sure, it can absolutely happen that way, but it more often happens when you plan specific time and are in a space for you to get creative. There are 4 things that have to be present in order for you to be creative. You ready? Space, time, self-confidence. Space, time, and self-confidence. All right, let's talk about that. Let's suppose that you were going to actually get creative, and you're in your office. Myrna, you have a very nice office down at the chamber, very classic old house that has been renovated, whatever. If you were going to get creative and you were sitting at your desk, what is almost certainly going to happen? Phone's going to ring. Email's going to happen. Somebody's going to come by and say, hey, Myrna, I need you to do whatever. So in your own work area, it's almost impossible for you to truly get creative because there's too many distractions. So you've got to go get in another place. And if you look at organizations like Google or Amazon or Apple, they've created thinking rooms that are very whimsical, very playful, whatever. I'm super excited about our new library, right? So over on Connell Road, there's going to be a brand new library. And we've been having discussions about this idea that maybe one of those rooms that they're going to have over there will be set up where organizations in town who don't have the ability to have a separate thinking space will be able to have that kind of place. And the folks at the library are saying that's something that we think might be really important, that people would want to come and specifically have brainstorming sessions, and we can create an environment where thinking creatively will be induced. Brilliant. Brilliant. Now, let's suppose you get in your space. Well, wait a minute, how did I get in my space? If I was going to go to that room and use it at the library, I would have to do what? Put it on my calendar. That's the first time. The first time is making time. Making time. Literally putting it on your calendar that from 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock, I'm going to be creative. I'm serious. Put it on your calendar. This is the time that I'm going to be creative. And then you get out of your work area, and then you go over here into this space. Maybe it's over at the new library. And now you've got all this stuff around you, and you're going to be creative. Will you be creative right away? Like in the first 60 seconds, will you think of a killer idea? Unfortunately not. Because as soon as you get in there, your mind is still in sort of a closed state. Myrna gets up from her desk, she gets over into this room, but she's still thinking about the email that came from Betty, and then she's also supposed to send an email to Tim about the conference center, and then she's got this David's call, and then I was going to go, right? So all this jumble of thoughts. Just relax. Just kind of sit quietly and just kind of calm yourself. It may take 10 minutes or even 15 minutes for you to enter into an open state of mind. Literally open meaning more childlike, when you used to just imagine and you didn't worry about whether or not what you were doing made sense. You were, in effect, getting crazy. You're getting into that open state of mind where you can truly start to be creative. But you remember I said time twice, because the second time is using all of the available time. You're gonna make time, but then once you get in there, use all available time. Here's what we typically do. We got a space. We set aside a time. We get in there, we quiet our minds. 15 minutes later, we really start thinking creatively, and we come up with an idea. What do? Done. Creative time, finished. Now, right, off we go. Now it's time to go implement our cool idea. Right? Am I right? Wait a minute. Maybe that's not the best idea. Maybe it's not even a good idea. If you allocated from 11 to 12, and you started really sort of creative thinking at 11:15, and you thought of a really cool idea at 11:25, how cool would that idea be by noon if you continued to think creatively, iterated on the idea, and came up with other kinds of things that might be possible? You may find out that by noon you've got a completely different idea that had nothing to do with the original idea, but because you were in that process of thinking creatively, the idea came. Get into a space where you can get away from your distractions and think creatively. Make time. Use all of the available time. And the fourth one was self-confidence. There is nothing that kills creativity more than the fear of making a mistake. We are petrified as professionals to think that we might make a mistake. Lee talked about the soccer goal. Did you have immediately a thought of your equivalent of not kicking it right to the center because you know that if it goes right to the goalie, you are the GOAT? And we would rather kick it to the right where there's a 57% chance that the goalie's going to get it, because that's not going to make us look like the GOAT. It'll look like the goalie made a great save. But we are not going to look dumb like if we kick it to the center and he just stands there, hey, thanks. We are so afraid of failure or making a mistake that we limit our ability to truly be creative. Only when you are bold enough to be free that you do not care what other people say or think about your ideas can you truly be creative. That's an open mind. If you watch children, if you want a master's thesis in creativity, then you go, after we're done, to Freedom Park and watch kids play. They do not care what we think or anyone else, their other friends. They don't care. They're imaginative, and they come up with amazing ideas and are incredibly creative. We have to recapture at least a part of that back. And we can do it if we find space, we make time, we take time, and we eliminate all self-doubt. When we do that and start to incorporate think time back into our professional lives, creativity will flow. And let me tell you what, if one of you walks out of here today and say, you know what, that was an amazing thing, what David said is absolutely true, I'm going to go implement it. So you put from 11 to 12 on your calendar. And maybe, you don't really have a space, so you say, I'm just going to do this in my office, whatever. And so you go in 11 to 12, and so what you do is you get in there and you shut off all your other devices, and you said, okay, I'm gonna really just, I'm gonna let my mind calm down, and man, I'm really thinking. And your office is glass, right? So everybody that walks by, right? So here's Myrna, she's thinking, we got cool stuff that's coming up for the chamber, thinking. And Betty walks by, and she sees Myrna like this. What is Betty thinking? What's Myrna doing? How come Myrna won't go to work? She's in there taking a nap, right? So we're so concerned about what other people are going to think about us, right? Because we're in there thinking and people are walking by, and we get self-conscious about it. So we have got to figure out how to value this idea of thinking and bring it back into the business. And in fact, those of you that have employee reviews, where you actually do a review of an employee and you're talking about goals and things for the upcoming years, for the next year, add thinking and creativity as a part of their goals for the next year. And it may not happen right away, but you can incrementally crawl, walk, run your way to implementing think time in your business. Finally, thoughtful responses. I learned this over my years as a CEO, that words matter, that what I say matters. And as a CEO, people are listening intently, like Jerry was talking about when I have those conversations. Most of what I do as a human being are reactions. I don't really respond. I react. If somebody says something that hurts my feelings, whatever, I might want to jab them back, right? Those are reactions. As leaders, we have to think about responses, which requires us to really kind of think about what we want. I know Jimmy knows this because we do a lot of prison ministry together with Kairos, but they talk about that when you react, you get what you get. And when you respond, you're more likely to get what you want. That you're thinking about the kind of outcome that you want. And so that if I really sort of guard against this autopilot and become much less prone to just automatically doing things, and if I incorporate think time and really try to come up with some creative things, and then I actually have a thoughtful response, whether that's to an individual inquiry, whether that's to an upset customer, or whether that's the strategic planning process that I'm doing for the next year or 3 years or 5 years for my company, that I'm going to thoughtfully respond and not react to situations or people when they occur. That ultimately, over time, you will see a dramatic shift in terms of how your business is viewed by your employees, by your customers, and your prospects, simply by eliminating autopilot, adding in think time, and implementing thoughtful response. One other quick point. When you're doing think time, don't be afraid to incorporate your customers into your think time exercises. You know, many of you might have brainstorming sessions where you get people around and you talk about different things from a brainstorming standpoint. And so these are great to actually invite customers to. But let me just give you one quick thing about brainstorming, because I do a lot of brainstorming sessions as a strategic planning facilitator, and I see business leaders doing brainstorming. But unfortunately, some of them don't have this idea that there are no recriminations. There's no bad ideas. When you're doing brainstorming, everything gets on the paper, right? So you think about a CEO, and he's gathered his employees around, and so you're trying to figure out how we're going to get more people to come into the store. And so he says, okay, everyone, this is our brainstorming time. Let's get some ideas going. How can we get more people coming into our retail location? And in the back is John. He's a little, maybe he's a newbie, from accounting or something like that. He says, sir, I think we should put a popcorn machine in the front of the office. CEO says, John, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard of. A popcorn machine in the lobby? What do you think this is, a carnival? That smell would go everywhere. This is a professional business. Okay, anybody, come on, give me an idea. Who's got an idea? Say, wait a minute. That CEO just squashed John like a bug. So I'm not sure my idea is any better than John's. And so what do? They don't raise their hand. They don't respond. If you're standing up in front of a group of folks and you're doing brainstorming, or if you're brainstorming on your own, don't edit. There's no editing. There's no wrong. Let's get crazy. Let's capture everything. Because I'll tell you that in many cases, the thing that gets up there isn't a good idea, but it spawns somebody else to think of something that then becomes a good idea. And let me tell you something else. John, the crazy guy that's got the popcorn idea, maybe his 5th idea isn't any better than the popcorn idea. But maybe his 12th idea is just as silly. But the 25th idea that he has winds up being something that hugely impacts your product, your service, your customers. John never gets to the 25th idea when you squash him like a bug right from the jump. Think about how you think. There's an intersection where desirability, possibility, and viability intersect. What's possible, what's desirable, those things come together, and in that center is this idea of innovation. If you're looking for what is it that's going to really be innovative in my business, you're looking for the intersection of those things. What technology allows me to do is one element, but what's viable in the marketplace, right? Because technology, that electricity passed through the air without having wires, that's now technology, but it's not yet viable in the marketplace. And then you have what's desirable to users. Do I have people who are ready to use this? Tim Jones and Star Waldron are here from Citizens Community Bank. A good example of this intersection of these three would be mobile remote deposit capture. So now, when I have somebody happens to give me a check, when I go speak at a conference, they give me a check, I can capture that with my phone. It's automatically deposited to my account at Citizens Community Bank. It's amazing technology, but it's because the technology of phones readily available through here, and the fact that it was priced such that an organization like Citizens Community, not just Bank of America or Wells Fargo has it, Citizens Community Bank has that. And certainly it's desirable for me because now I can deposit at a time and place of my choosing with whatever device I have in my hand. What is that kind of product for your organization that's the equivalent of mobile remote deposit capture that becomes that game changer for your organization? So, What's the next technology to watch? I could sit here, I thought about it. What am I going to tell them is really kind of the future of it? Kevin Moland actually teased you with this. I think something that you should pay attention to, regardless of what kind of business you're in, is virtual reality. How many of you here have put on a pair of virtual reality headset, and actually played with it? I encourage all of you to do it. You've seen the commercials where the kids are out there with it, and there's that older fellow. He's like, hey, let me look at it. And all of a sudden he's like, oh, and he's doing whatever. I've played around with virtual reality a little bit, but my real immersion of it was at Tennessee Tech University. I was doing a talk there on my book, and I spoke to their business school, and then we had a really nice faculty lunch, and they took me over to their iCube, their high technology center. We walked in, and they started off with sort of a regular VR experience where I was actually swimming in the Tennessee River, and I could see the effect of pollution and agricultural runoff. That was cool. And then we actually went into a room where they actually had sensors all around, and I put on an Oculus Rift, which is what these glasses are right here. And in front of me was a 7-foot-tall human heart. And I could walk all around it, and then I stuck my head in the heart, and I could see inside everywhere where stuff go, and it was all labeled. And this was a program made for nursing students to actually learn about anatomy so that they could not just look at it on a book in 2D, they could actually go in the human body and see every little part of where stuff was. This was really cool. And then he took me into another room. We put on a set of glasses, and I'm standing on a ledge of a medieval castle. It was almost like I was immersed in a video game. And as I looked down, 20 feet below me was the floor of the castle. So I'm standing there and talking to Professor Dr. Payne, and we're having this whole conversation. And he's like, David, check this out. And I'm looking around and doing all that stuff. And we were just having this conversation, and then he pushed me. He literally pushed me, and I fell off the ledge. I didn't actually go anywhere, but my brain told me that I was falling. And I felt wind rushing up against my face. And I wasn't like a free fall, like, fall. It was really more like a little superhero kind of like, kind of a little easy fall. But when I hit the ground, my knees bent like that. Because my brain told me that what I was seeing was real, right? So when I start thinking about the impact of what virtual reality could mean for your business, think about if you're in retail and you could immerse yourself by having your customers, your potential customers, actually see themselves with and using the product. And as Kevin mentioned to you, the glasses are changing. So instead of me having this big kind of headset on with a big tether that goes on, now they're becoming much more lighter. And as Kevin mentioned, the future of glasses will not really look much different than this. But they will have that kind of augmented reality or mixed reality about them. And so we really can see now some things that are changing. And because I do spend a lot of time talking about financial services, I thought about what would it be like if I could solve a particular problem that financial services have, but they were doing it with virtual reality. One of the real issues that financial institutions have is how do they provide financial wisdom to millennials and those younger folks that we talked about coming after them. We're going to call them Minecrafters. Gen Z, they're Minecrafters because that's that game where they can build worlds, whatever, is Minecraft. They all know how that world goes. Those are the next generation behind them. Millennials and Minecrafters. But you know what they're not very good at? Balancing a checkbook. Or keeping track of funds. Or knowing how they have to allocate monies to different things. We might call that a budget. Now, these are the kinds of things that they're not inherently good at, but financial institutions may have a vested interest in helping them do that. So you can have all kinds of classes and stuff, but it doesn't really stick with them. But maybe if we started thinking about what would that relationship be like, so just kind of walk with me a little bit into the future and think about a millennial who's just gotten paid, and he's looking at his tablet, and he sees that he's got incoming money, and he's got to figure out how he's going to pay his bills. Okay, so here he is, he's looking at it, oh, I got to pay these bills. He puts on his virtual reality glasses. Now he's got all these avatars, student loans, savings, rent, utilities, and here's his payroll pizza. He's got $864.88, and so rent and utilities, student loans, they just take their slice. They don't wait to be served. And now he gives eating out and groceries and he, gaming, he gives them, and now the pies. Whoa, wait, savings over there go, hey, what about pizza for me? And so the millennial thinks about it. He said, well, maybe gaming doesn't need as much. And he takes some pizza from gaming and he gives it to savings, right? And so with this kind of avatar look, now as he takes his virtual reality glasses off and he looks now at his online and he sees that all of his bills have been paid and all of his money has been properly budgeted. Crazy? I think so. I think it's crazy awesome. Now, you think about your business. Think about where you're at. Think about what you have as an organization that you can bring to your customers and your future customers. The chamber can have a whole virtual meeting and talk about the kinds of things that you could put on if somebody wanted to put on a program like this through virtual reality. Jimmy Watley can take us out into the field and show how these microbes are going to help stuff grow potentially through virtual reality. On and on and on it goes. It's some folks now saying that by Christmas of 2018, just about 18 months away, that virtual reality in the kind of form that I'm talking about will literally be the thing that's under the Christmas tree for people to buy. Prices come down, functionality will go up, you no longer have to be tethered, right? So when we think about these technologies, don't think it's crazy that somehow and in some form or fashion that this kind of thing is going to become how you will be able to stretch out markets, how you will be able to expand the way people would think about interacting and using your products and services, and even geography. Who can get online and potentially experience your products and services? Or, as Kent was saying, that you might be somebody who is actually working for another company half a world away, because now the physical place where we are no longer is a barrier for who we're serving or how we're serving. Now, barriers to innovation. If you're going to do innovation, these are the things that will stop you. No leadership buy-in. If you're the senior leader, you can make this happen. But if you're downstream, right, if you're a senior VP or if you're a VP or if you're just, wherever you are in the organization, there may be people above you that don't buy into this. So if they don't buy into it, it's going to be really hard for you to change the organization. You know how you make that change? Is you start taking little bits and pieces of stuff like we talked about today, and you start feeding it to them in small bites. Let's say that you had a CEO and you were saying, man, I wish my CEO could have been here today. And you get the presentations we're going to send you, and you send them to them all at once. You just throw up innovation all over him. Here, look at this. You think he's going to take the time or she's going to take the time to read through all that material? No. But if you take little small bits, if you take a little piece of it and then send it through with, hey, this is what Dr. Gustafson was saying here. This is what Lee Wetherington was saying at this part. Here's something really insightful that I heard Jerry say. In little pieces, small chunks. Water wears down rock. Find an article online, send it through. Hey, really thought you might be interested in this. That's the way that you can overcome that. If our thinking is set on autopilot, then we're not going to ever change. We're just going to be stuck in our lanes, so we got to figure out how we're going to identify that. Now we're not thinking about how we think. We're not incorporating think time. We're not doing thoughtful response. We've got to be able to change that. And if we're not encouraging innovation, that when people make a mistake, that can be a mistake in execution or it can be a mistake in innovation. Errors in execution aren't really all that valuable. If Star Waldron has a teller who just can't balance her drawer, we're not going to celebrate that. But if there's somebody in customer service that's trying to do right by a customer and maybe they don't quite do it the right way, but they're trying to innovate, we need to celebrate that, especially if it's a mistake, so that we can help them learn and potentially find new groundbreaking ways that we can expand our organization. Excuses. Our company's too small. I'm not the leader, so I don't have any way of directing my organization to do anything. We will find an excuse to not move forward in almost any way, shape, or form that we can. Well, I'm just here in Lowndes County. How How can I be expected to do something? You know, that's what folks are doing in Atlanta or New York City. Or how about, hey, we're just an organization. We have other vendors that are doing the innovation for us. We don't innovate here. We just use their products and services. Those are all excuses limiting you from achieving what you could either as an individual or as companies. And finally, I mentioned this, talking about this idea of failure. The fear of failure will stop us from moving forward. The fear that we might make a mistake, the fear that somebody might ridicule our idea stops us dead in our tracks. We got to start thinking like children. We got to get crazy and think about the different things that you heard through this program today. And just take one thing, take one idea, take one thought and figure out how you can implement that either personally or in your business, and then take that step forward. Take one step forward and then take another step and another step. I started off this morning early telling you about these 5 products, and we said they were in common how? They were discovered by accident. Here's the important thing. Every single one of these inventors was trying to invent something. They weren't sitting around doing nothing and a big jar of Roundup fell on his head. They were working on something and then were aware enough to see that there might be some other value to this, right, besides what they were doing. But they were busy innovating. They were moving forward with innovation. That's my challenge to you today, is to find something this next week or this next month or in this particular year. Find a way to move forward with an idea. As you go into strategic planning, you're thinking about 2018 and beyond. Come up with an idea that you think you can implement in your organization to be innovative, and take that step and move forward. Innovation rarely happens, but it doesn't come look for you. You have to be busy about making it happen. And whatever you do, make a conscious decision to innovate. Ask, who will my customers be? Not who my customers are. Who will my customers be, and how am I going to thrill and delight them? How is it that they're going to find me and become a part of my organization that I can serve them, and how am I going to be the kind of entity that they would want to buy from? We're going to make enterprise-wide innovation a focus of the entire business, brainstorming ideas, and then selecting that idea and get busy. Final thought. Don't be this guy. Don't be this guy. Now, here's 4 people with some kind of hazmat suits on looking at, nuclear waste or a chemical spill. And here's Tommy Bahama Pants. Hey, what are you guys doing? What are you looking at over here? This guy is clueless. These guys are smart, and this guy is crazy like 1450, right? The bad crazy. Don't be that guy. Find an idea and get innovative. Thank you all very much. Appreciate you being here today. Thank you. If I could have the speakers, you guys come up, all my speakers come up here. Cachet, Prescott, Dr. Kent Gustafson, Jerry Federico, Lee Wetherington, Estel Powell, Kevin Moland. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Now, nothing pleases me more than being able to point out where Lee Wetherington is wrong. So I would like to take the opportunity to do that right now. In Lee's presentation, he talked about the statistics that when multiple entities get together, that the actual probability of success, right, is that probability factor. He mentioned 4 groups, 85 is really only 52% of success. But let me tell you something. There were entities, when I first had this idea of putting this innovation summit together, there were 2 very important partners. One was the Valdosta Chamber of Commerce, Valdosta Lowndes Chamber of Commerce. The other was the Rainwater Conference Center. I'm just telling you that within those 3 groups, the chances of success were 100% because of those organizations. You're wrong. Thank you very much. I want to thank Myrna Ballard, Betty Morgan. Where's Betty? Betty's back over here who did all the legwork and stuff. And Tim, thank you so much for the use of your great facilities here. We really appreciate all that you've done to put together this conference. And again, we're dismissed, but we're going to stick around. If you guys have questions, we've got like an open QA time if you want to have questions, or we'll stand here and mix and mingle, but I know you guys have other stuff to do as well. So again, on behalf of the Chamber, on the Rainwater Conference Center, and all of these amazing speakers, thank you all very much. Thank you.